Hello everyone, this is Cleric here. Welcome to the Ravens Roundtable. Starting up a series of podcasts here, mostly because I had a about 3 hour long conversation, which is turning into this podcast as a recorded moment to kind of clarify some things in heavyweight versus lightweight. And in all honesty, this is something I genuinely enjoyed. I was having so much fun to the whole conversation. I was listening very intently, filled a lot of gaps of things I didn't know. And honestly, it was great just to hang out with a bunch of Armored Core fans of various generations and just nerd out on Armored Core for a few hours. So I might have to make this a regular thing. How often that regular thing will be, I don't know. I might make it, every couple weeks, maybe once a month or something. But let's put it this way. If you like this video, it's more of a podcast style. So feel free to just kind of put this on in the background. We're working on other things. If you like more things like this, feel free to like the video and give me a comment below that you liked it. And also, I'm willing to take suggestions on topics. Is there something particularly you'd like to cover? And maybe we'll go from there. So without further ado, welcome to the first episode of the podcast, The Ravens Roundtable. I have a bunch of people here who like to play Armored Core of various generations, and just kind of having an open conversation, no real notes or points or bullets or anything here to kind of cover, just kind of talking about kind of not necessarily the meta per se, although the meta is going to come to the conversation, I'm sure, more or less the kind of builds, heavies versus lights kind of conversation that we've seen through the years, and including Armored Core 6. So again, this is Cleric. My history with Armored Core started with Armored Core 1, actually technically the demo disc from Pizza Hut, good old demo disc, and all the way up through now. My PvP experience started probably Another Age with Zealous here. Was up in his room playing Another Age on split screen with the multi-missiles causing the frame rate to drop to 5 frames per second.
Yes.
And then third gen did a lot of actually tournaments, thanks to Zealous in the Midwest scene and Tierson. Midwest Mayhem, Midwest Madness, all those good things. And did some online with 4, did some online with 5, now doing 6. So we'll go down the list here a little bit. Let's go and go to Celtic Spear. Let's go to you.
Hello. My experience with Armored Core, I don't really have an intro. My experience with Armored Core, I started with Ninebreaker, and then I just went through all the series from there. For PvP experience, I started doing like local Ninebreaker. We had like a little group here. Then I moved on to the PS3 era games. Played a ton of Forancer, played a ton of Verdict Day especially. I've done 4, and I've also done a lot of Silent Lightnet play, curiously enough. But yeah, most of my experience comes from the new gen games. And I've also played 6, of course. I've been there for probably have 300 something hours there.
I didn't know you started with Ninebreaker. That's interesting.
Yeah, so there's a funny story there. I found the series because I really liked the designs from Kawamori, who did most of the designs for Armored Core.
Right. Shoji,
Yep.
Makes sense.
Yeah, and I saw that he designed for the games, and I was like, oh, it's Armored Core, and I started reading about them, and then I randomly run into Ninebreaker on a store, and it was covered in dust, it's been there for a while. No one bought it.
Typical AC story.
And I bought it thinking that it was Master of Arena. So imagine the surprise. Imagine the surprise I had when I found out that game was not in fact Master of Arena. It was something completely different. It's something completely yeah, it was something very, very different from the entirety of the series. So
yeah, quite the different PvE experience Ninebreaker has.
Man.
To be honest, I will not replace it because I feel like Ninebreaker prepared me very well for every other game after that.
Oh, I bet it would.
It's basically a tutorial.
That's the irony, the whole shtick about the training program, from when you kick off Ninebreaker, and it was like that big jump, pre-last Raven. But it's funny, hearing you say that because it served its purpose, literally. I mean, the way you got an AC, it's crazy.
Yeah. Cool, awesome. All right, we'll go over to TM Raven.
Howdy, partner. Hey guys.
Hey.
So I started Armored Core with Armored Core 2. was it back in 2000. My very first Armored Core game. I loved it. Played it multiple times over. I skipped AA for some reason. Actually, no, I rented it, and those were the blockbuster days. So you had like 5 days to play the game. I got like halfway through, and I had to return it. And I was a kid back then, so I couldn't like go back and rent it again. I played 3, Silent Line, Nexus, Ninebreaker, Last Raven. Last Raven is where I've put nearly all my time in Armored Core. If I had to guess between all the PvE playthroughs and online PvP and whatnot, I've probably put in close to 5,000 hours in Last Raven, and I still play today
Love it.
via emulator. The AC Discord has a big Last Raven / Ninebreaker crowd that still plays those games. So, I've dabbled in 4 and 4 Answer. Back then, I was one of the mods and staff of Armored Core Online. We helped host tournaments for 4 and 4 Answer. When I bought AC5, it was kind of dead on arrival, so I didn't really play too much. I skipped Verdict Day, and then 10 years later, AC6 comes out. I love the PvE aspect of it. It's probably the best PvE of any AC game ever. And I enjoy AC6 team, like 3s, quite a lot. So that's my story.
Cool. All right, thank you. All right, Sabbath, go over to you.
All right, yeah, I'm Sabbath. So I grew up with Silent Line. It's my first game. I was like 5 years old when I first played it, and then growing up, I just found out I had a huge affinity for mechas and whatnot through that. And then after like many years passed, I'm like, wait, there were more games than just Silent Line. And so I'm like, yeah, I'm gonna play through every single Armored Core game, which I ended up doing except for 5 because I don't have the emulator working for it at the time. And then when Armored Core 6 was announced, basically, I'm like, yeah, I'm going to go hard on content. So now I would consider myself a YouTuber. I'm a top 33s player. I think top 15 on the leaderboard right now. Apologies.
Nice.
And
Subtle flex
yeah,
there.
subtle flex and all, yeah, just a little bit. Yeah, so I think what really draws me into Armored Core 6, one, I didn't come late into it because all of the PvP of the other games happened when I was way too young to be competing. But Armored Core 6 also just seems like it really appeals to how I like playing the Armored Core games. I like that it's a little bit more ground-based than like For Answer, for example. But I also like that there's a bit more oomph to the attacks, for example, with the stagger meter. I think even though it has a lot of issues, obviously, in the PvP, I overall think it's a net positive in terms of enjoyment. And so, yeah, that's my experience. Lifelong Armored Core fan, but relatively new to PvP.
Notice he had to throw in the fact that he was 5 when he played, Silent Line.
Yeah, I was
subtly,
young.
subtly dating the rest of us, but that's okay. I won't.
Yeah, I was a little
you.
young. Yeah,
We're all
and that's
boomers over here.
crazy. And that's crazy because I'm still considered an old gen fan and a vet because I've beaten all the games except for 5. And yet you guys are like probably like at least 20 years older than me. Maybe not 20, but at least 10 years older than me.
30s,
Hey man,
early 40s.
30s, yeah.
Yeah.
There you go.
There you go.
All right, thanks, Sabbath. All right, Dirk, go ahead.
Hi, I'm Derek Donk. I started playing Armored Core with 3. My dad got it for me for Christmas when I was like 8. He thought it was Gundam. It wasn't.
That's
Very
mistake.
hard. My small child brain kind of got clapped a bit, but I had an older brother, and I think he did most of the part finding and everything. But my competitive experience started with him recording our fights on VHS to watch back.
Oh gosh, that's amazing.
And we did that a lot for third gen. Man.
That's next level.
All the way through Last Raven. But then like fourth gen came out, PS3. He bought it. He owned the PS3, and he moved out. And around that time, I kind of like just picked up other games, took a little break from AC, I guess. But then I started like streaming and doing shit like 2 years ago. And at that point, I was like, well, what can I play? And then I remembered there were Armored Core games I hadn't played. So I picked up 4th gen, met Link's Tetsu, and just played the hell out of every single one of them. So when AC6 got announced, I was like falling out of my chair. It's been fun so far. I love 3v3. I'm S-ranking it already because I can't stop playing it. And I like to play heavies a lot, so I'll be talking about that.
Cool. Very
Awesome.
cool. And last, but of course not least, Zealous here.
Hey, everybody. Hey, what's going on? Zealous here. I am, first and foremost, a quad fanatic. I pretty much refuse to pilot anything else, main at least. I'll use, tanks, bipeds, RJs. I'll try stuff out, experiment. But quads are my number one love. I started Armored Core back in 1997. Same cleric with the Pizza Hut demo disc. Funniest thing, it didn't grab me right away because it was at my buddy's birthday, my next door neighbor, and they were just sitting in the garage doing just painting. I thought that's what it was about. I was like, "Is this? What is this? It's just like a paint sim? Like, you got to be kidding me, right?" And then I got a couple hours with it on my own, and then I was insta hooked. And Project Phantasma, Master of the Arena, and fast forward, Armored Core 2 is where I really, really felt it jumped off. I met a cleric during my high school days, and we had a group when I was in the Midwest and Illinois. We did a lot of just verses together, link play, and that kind of deal. And lo and behold, I found out about Armored Core Midwest Mayhem through the rando Yahoo group board post, and I said, "Oh my God, wait! There's a scene for the other people play this. Like, people go across state lines." So that really kicked off the whole PvP saga. I met Tierson at the time. He was running Armored Core Midwest Mayhem. Started with AC3, and my first one I actually got in on was ACMM2 with Silent Line, and it went from there. And once Tierson left the scene, he mentored me, and he had me take over the next events, which were Armored Core Midwest Arena. We did that for Ninebreaker and Last Raven. The scene went on, and Last Raven was the last Midwest event we had. Always kept up with AC as they came out, though, regardless of what form. AC4, FA, did dabble in those, played plenty, and of course 5 and Verdict Day when they came out. Did more of the PvP in Verdict Day and 5 than for 4 and FA. FA wasn't 4 wasn't quite my cup of tea as much, but it's AC, so I'm going to play it. Period. And fast forward to today, 6. It's incredible to be here. Like you guys, I just was collectively falling out of my chair when it got announced. It's the last thing I expected to see come up at Game Awards, and here we are now.
For the whole day.
I couldn't believe it. I couldn't believe it. You get it. I couldn't believe it. And here we are now with an Action Game of the Year award to a title that's been utterly obscure for decades, and it's wild. It's absolutely wild. So AC has really had an incredible ride over time. I love what we've got represented here. People who've come in on later games or earlier games, but we got all kinds of perspectives. So I can't wait to dig into this chat.
Awesome.
Nice.
Shout outs to Yahoo groups, GeoCities, Angel Fire, all those old websites. That was probably like, what are those?
No, actually, I use some of that stuff.
Oh, hey, you know what? Extra props to you.
I was not a very good kid growing up. Let's just say that much. I use some of the places I should not be part of.
Too much time on Newgrounds.
I didn't start really actively using it until Skype though.
Okay.
Cool.
Anyways,
all right, so we're kind of here. So I know there was a little bit of I don't know, can I call it a row on the AC Discord after the Strikers video came out. The main thing was to give you a little bit of a setting the groundwork here. Originally, that conversation was supposed to be a podcast talking about what would the older mechanics no longer in Armored Core look like in the modern era if we were to bring them back. We're going to talk about turn speed. We're going to talk about heat mechanic. We're going to talk about a lot of different things, and it just kind of devolved into a completely different conversation than I was ready for. And it divulged a longer conversation. One I would like to have gotten more nuanced into, but I think if you go back to that podcast, I think I talked for a total of 8 minutes in that 2 hours or so video. So I'm not to detract anyone who was talking in the video, but it was just more, I wanted to go more nuanced in the conversation because I feel like it deserves more clarification as far as previous games. I had made nods to the fact, jousting tanks in SL. I had mentioned, tanks in 5. But I think some people might need some clarity as far as what the quote unquote meta or what the strong build archetypes were in previous games. So, let's just go back one generation. Let's start with 5th gen. So we'll go and start with you, Celtic. Anyone else is welcome to chime in too, has experience with this. I will tell you, I had more time in 5 than Verdict Day. 5 was because that was when I was still right before I got married, and Verdict Day was after I got married, and I just got a new job. I moved out of state. We're getting ready to have a baby. There was a lot of things going on, so my Verdict Day time was very, very short. So 5th gen regular 5 was probably more when I spent time into. But I remember the ridiculousness that was me being able to one-shot people with tank legs if I kicked them with tank legs. I remember having that a couple times. It's like, what in the world is this? And so Celtic, can you? I know you have a lot of 5th gen experience, so can you kind of break down a little bit what the build archetypes or meta or what the strong options were in the 5th gen era?
All right, so the first thing worth mentioning, since you mentioned that you didn't have that much experience in Verdict Day from 5, is that Verdict Day has the sequel curse that I think almost every Armored Core sequel has suffered from. Well, I wouldn't say suffer, but there's a pattern you can notice where every sequel gets more energy and becomes faster than the previous one.
Yep.
That is
Usually.
true.
I would agree.
That
Yeah,
is true.
that's true.
It's a rough
can't-
pattern, like.
I can't think of a one where that's not the case, actually.
So just like it happened with 4 and 4 Answer, Ninebreaker to Last Raven, Starline to 3, all of that. Verdict Day got faster, got more energy. I think it also got more stability because well, it definitely got more stability across the board because stone locks are not nearly as common as they were in AC5. So as a rough like comparison, that's basically how the meta like changed. I mean, not the meta, but like the base mechanics changed. The game just became faster. You have more energy as a point of reference. Overall, the way the meta or like the builds are like built in that game is a little different from the previous ones because usually it's not like it didn't happen before, but in Verdict Day and 5, you build a lot around weapons, like to counter specific weapons. You tailor your frames towards blocking a specific defense thresholds, usually.
Yeah, and you do that by mixing parts, right? Because heavies were generally like thermal resist, etc.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, for example, like the main thing they did was that they separated legs into a specific main like defense types. So, for example, a quad will specialize on CE, chemical weapons, high explosive anti-tank rounds. A midweight, on the other hand, is not going to specialize on CE. It's going to specialize on K, so kinetic energy weapons, saber rounds, just your good old bullets. And then you have heavyweights, which will specialize in T, which in this case are laser, plasma, the like energy weapons essentially. So a lot of the times, it's not really a hard rule because not every leg class follows it, but usually you don't build with the parts that your legs are like related to. So for example, if you're making a heavyweight, which is a mistake that a lot of people I see, like a lot of new players do, is like, oh, I'm making a heavyweight, let me put heavyweight parts on. Like it makes sense, like in the older games. In here, that's a really bad mistake because you already have enough. Like Verdict Day and 5 are a game about having enough. You don't need a lot of defense like in the older games. In the older games, usually you needed to stack a lot of defense to like notice a difference.
Yeah, it
in
came
here,
down
you
to
only
like
need
a lot of flat values in some of the older
Yeah.
games. So like they would work for machine guns, but not bigger weapons unless you had a big value.
Yep.
So-
And then you had the breakpoints too.
So with the breakpoints now, you only need enough defense to block a specific weapon or to notice a tangible like decrease in like damage intake. So for example, the way you will build a heavyweight is that on a heavyweight, you get to pick between either going KE or CE as your secondary defense. If you go KE, you block for 1870 KE is usually the number people go for. If you go for CE, you try to get 2096. It's like the breakpoint. You'll notice that I'm mentioning a lot of like specific numbers, and it's because of that. The moment you hit a specific number, a weapon that has the same attack value will do reduced damage. So you only need enough defense. There's also like a passive defense formula and all of that. So usually, roughly, the meta center around blocking a specific weapons. The main one is the one we called the laser speed. The laser speed is like the dominant like build. It consists of 2 Karasawa laser rifles, the 4-shot specifically. You can use the 12-shot too, but it's mainly the 40-shot because in that game there's 3 Karasawas for Karasawa lovers.
Yeah, I thought that was
There's a
interesting
40-shot.
Yeah, I remember that.
Yeah, there's one with 40 shots, which it deals the least amount of damage, but of course it has the highest damage potential because you have 40 shots, 40 like 5k damage shots, so that's a lot. You have the 12 shot, which is an in between, and then you have the 4 shot. Like literally only has 4 shots. It's a giant it's basically a handheld beam cannon.
It's basically an overweapon, isn't it? More or less, but not an overweapon.
Yeah, it has 10k at least damage per shot. It's insane. It's a huge.
That's beautiful.
It's really fun to use. So yeah, the combination will be laser rifles with high speed missiles. That's why it's called the laser speed combo. And in order to block that, you need 1870 KE. And
so you're
usually
building around those weapons existing.
Yeah, you will
if
see
that comes out, you're screwed, and then you're covered for anything less.
It's because it's a very simple combo. You just shoot the laser, then you let go of the missiles, and that's it. You just deal 15k damage on someone if you hit effective. So a lot of the frames you will see hit for 1870. Or they try to if they are not hitting for 1870, they will be trying to hit for different breakpoints depending on what they are trying to counter. Because you can ignore that specific counter to go for another weapon. For example, if you're getting killed by a lot of battle rifles, you can choose to go CE instead of KE to block the battle rifles because they do chemical damage. You don't really block them, but you just get enough enough CE to mitigate their damage enough that they are not no longer a threat.
To kind of give people a little point of reference, so you say 15k damage was from that, right? Now, obviously, that's not what you're going to see in AC6. So, what was the average AP then? Would you?
Say? Yeah. That's a good. Thanks for bringing it up. Overall, I often joke that in AC6 you take verdict day damage numbers with all gen health bars.
That's how it feels.
I actually like that. It's definitely how it feels.
Yeah, that's essentially how it feels to me. Think the average lightweight, the average competitive lightweight has anywhere between 27k to 30k AP.
And what about your beefy chunky boys? What were they?
Your beefy chunky boys will be hovering around 40k, 37k.
With higher defenses, mind you. So those damage break points become pretty important there.
So just to put it into perspective, in AC6, a tank has almost half of the AP that a lightweight will have in 5th gen. So the damage numbers are comparatively.
Not to mention stagger too, doubling the damage as well, so they're even squishier.
So you take a lot of damage in 6 while not having the health bars to back it up. A lightweight is 9k, 10k at most.
Mm-hmm.
If you want to be a fast one, and you're taking 6k damage off of a single stagger rotation, if you're not dead, assuming.
Yeah,
if you run the full
talking
lamp
about
set,
AP and damage, are fights a lot longer in 5th gen in PvP, or can they still go super quick?
It depends. So here's the thing with Armored Core, which is kind of funny. I don't feel it in AC6 as much, but the time to kill is extremely short in every game. Maybe not so much in the old gen ones, but the time to kill is extremely short. However, the effective length of a match is usually around 5 minutes, because your mobility, your defenses, and all that influences your survivability so much that obviously if you're standing still and you get shot, you're gonna die instantly.
Yeah.
But that's not gonna be the case. In AC6, I feel you just die instantly because the game allows you to just stop someone in their tracks.
Yeah,
do you think that's
just for sure?
Do you think that's just a result? Because we asked Ogreson and them, what their word was for this game. They said aggression. But I know there was a lot more jockeying per position. Because I know maps were vastly different in 5 and Verdict 8 compared to 6. They were entire cityscapes versus an arena, for example. So I mean, it's very different landscape-wise as far as maps go. Would that be more to we'll call the terms of engagement you would have seen in 5 and Verdict 8 as far as the map overlays go versus what you see in 6? Might lend itself to why that might be the case.
Yeah, an average map in 5 will be. I think the closest comparison in 6 would be Asylum, except twice the size.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
think we have
that
more
makes
of like
sense.
third gen size
But like
maps.
the wall,
We do
that's a
have
really
more
large
like
map.
gens for sure. It's more gen.
Yeah,
size,
like the
gen
wall.
3
The wall
size.
also is a
Mhm.
good comparison.
Mhm.
If the wall was like wider, it would be like a basically an AC5 Burning Day map. It also it depends on how you consider what the situation is, because you have 4v4 in 5 and Verdict Day. You also have duels, or you have 2v2, so you have 3v3s, because you're not limited by the game itself. You're limited to
Don't
how many
forget the
players you have,
operators.
and the operators as
Justice
well.
with them.
Operators make a huge difference. Like going into the JP server and running into a team with an operator, you're in trouble.
That's something I was a little sad about not being in threes with the team environment. I feel like that'd be so useful.
Because just having
Yeah.
someone to tell everyone to focus a single guy is like huge, and you have
Mhm.
True.
the eye in the sky like looking out for you.
Right.
Especially with no like conventional map that AC.
That too,
Yeah.
yeah. There is no map in
Yeah.
5 either. That's where
So-
the operator comes in handy.
Yep.
Here's my question then. So you mentioned the speed lasers, right? The speed missiles with the dual 40-shot carousels.
Yeah.
So what would typically run that? Like, what would the frame look like? You're talking a middleweight, a more lightweight. Like, I don't quite remember what the weight differentials were for the arm parts, for example, to see what those carousels would have weighed. I'm assuming they'd be not as heavy compared to the insane 4 shots, but I could be wrong.
They are roughly actually the same weight. They are essentially the same weapon after all. But the main thing is that I forgot to mention that when I said that was the meta, that's mainly the meta in team battles. Because, in team battles, you want to be as simple as possible. Like, usually
True.
simplicity trumps all. So instead of having a like crazy team comp, you can have, say, 2 people on laser speed, and then those 2 people are focusing like a single target, and then you have, I don't know, a tank and a heavyweight for coverage for other targets or other situations, and like you get a good team comp that way. In duels, you will see it less because it's easier to deal in a 1v1 against laser speed. It's
So-
easier to like overwhelm someone who's using that kind of weapon.
So
But usually you will see it on
Go ahead.
quads and tanks. I mean, quads, heavyweights. Midweights can run it too, but it's a little heavy for midweights.
All right, so my question is, so I remember hearing a lot of complaints at one point, maybe got patched or changed, with sniper cannon quads. I remember people complaining about that being a thing at one point. Did that kind of just not become a thing anymore, or was that just like a temporary problem?
So the thing with it's temporary. It got patched. It wasn't really that big of a deal after all. It's just that sniper cannons will get but every cannon does. So every leg has a gimmick in 5th gen. Not every leg has a different gimmick, but the gimmick with bipeds, for example, is that whenever they go into ready position, which is when you use a cannon, they will gain a shield. Like the shield in their legs will expand, and you will get added defenses. The gimmick of the quads is that they buff the fire rate of any cannon you're using. So usually for not only that, but they also buff the accuracy. So for example, if you're using a sniper cannon on a heavy, which you're not gonna see usually, you're firing like bang, bang. Like there's a huge delay. You put that on a quad, and now you're firing like it's an assault rifle. Bang, 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 bang,
Oh
with
gosh,
perfect accuracy.
yeah, that makes sense.
And it's worth noting
Totally.
that in that game that the quads are stationary while using these weapons. Like all
Yes, you can-
ACs except for tanks had to stop to use those.
Right.
The gimmick with tanks is that they can move while using the cannons, while everyone else has to remain stationary.
A common thing that might say things hold true throughout all the different generations as a whole.
Yeah, tanks get to have fun all the time.
Yeah,
The only
tanks are the ones that
the
can
only
have fun, but they're
exception-
slow.
The only exception is 4th gen, where you can use cannons no matter what, assuming.
True.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Well, not
And
really assuming, but like the penalty in 4th gen is that if your cannon overwhelms your stability, you're gonna get staggered every time you fire.
Yep,
Yeah,
it'll
the
break your
Right.
FCS
stability.
lock and cause all sorts of inconvenience.
of course, you had the.
but-
Go ahead, son.
But usually you can just bring a cannon on any build in 4th gen.
It's easy.
Yeah. For us, it made it
Easily.
even easier.
So,
Yep.
so it sounds like in teams. So in teams, it was more of a heavy dominated series, or that was heavy mid, you would say?
Heavy mid's kind of done like originally. A lot of the meta was like battle rifle rush teams. You also had some other like stuff like handguns with large missiles will be really dominant too, for a patch or two. But that was patched out eventually. Give me a sec.
The other thing I was gonna ask too, like that's in teams. What about like duels, like 1v1s?
Duels it's way more flexible because it's a 1v1, so you can bring more things, and usually you want to cover more bases. So
That's
there's
interesting. Wait, you want to cover more bases instead of specializing in just one thing?
Yes, because in a 1v1 you're not gonna be like in a team battle, for example. You can get away with like on a heavyweight only bringing CE weapons, which is a thing that some teams do. Because
That's actually really interesting because I feel like it would be the other way around in AC6, if anything.
For example, you will bring 2 battle rifles with CE missiles and hit machine guns. This is a specific like weapon set because you will usually bring their battle rifles anyway. What changes is what you bring behind them. And in this case, you're bringing heavy machine guns, hit machine guns, sorry, and CE missiles to counter a specific build, which is like highly mobile. So you want something with a high fire rate and good tracking to attack it. And if you ever run into a situation where you will be countered by, say, a CE shield, you won't be able to break it on your own. But you have 3 other teammates with each AC having 5 guns, so you have 15 other guns ready to shoot that shield off the enemy AC you're trying to kill.
I see. So that's why you could specialize more in team fights, whereas 1v1s it was.
On a duel, you are more in trouble because, like, for example, another common, well, not really that common, but another thing that some teams do is that they bring a sniper with 3 sniper rifles. Because the high damage sniper rifle tends to run out of ammo in team fights, so you want to bring another one as backup. If you try to do that in a duel, you won't be able to because shields will basically render that build useless. You can bring a KE shield, a kinetic shield, and like you're not gonna break it with just the sniper rifles. You need something to break the shield off. And in that case, you will want to bring something to cover your bases. So that instead of bringing 2 snipers, you will bring 2 snipers and a hit machine gun or a laser rifle to be your shield breaker.
Right. And relating that to like AC6, I feel like a lot of the best builds in this game in duels are hyper specialized. Run away super fast, shoot missiles, or run super close with shotguns and some cannons. But like whenever they're against something that is a bit different, they struggle a lot more. And if you bring a mixed loadout, you can't do any of those things especially well.
Yeah, usually in
That's why
5th
we
gen you have. Go ahead.
That's why you see like these archetypes come out with Armored Core 6. We have like rats and all that stuff. Like because they have to specialize in one specific thing and do that specific thing really, really well.
True.
So also 5th gen gives you a lot of flexibility with what weapons you can bring because a lot of weapons overlap in rule.
Right.
That game has more guns than AC6 has parts. Like you are spoiled for choice.
Yeah, there's a ton. There's so
I
many
do
parts in
remember
5th gen.
how
It's
many
nuts.
weapons there were. That's the one thing I'll always like about 5th gen. Every time I revisit Verdict Day.
Each of those weapons can be tuned to your liking with 3 different specs. So like every gun can be like 5 different guns depending on what tunings you're running. So you are spoiled for choice in that game for guns.
And it's sort of interesting how that whole thing came to life. I remember when I first looked at 5 when the new defense system was announced, KE, CE, and TE. The first thing that came to mind to me was like rock, paper, scissors. My concern was because I was more focused about, duel. Well, shoot, if I bring scissors, rock will win, right? If I bring rock, like paper will win. Like, where's this go? And kind of makes me wish I got more time in with teams because I bet there's a lot of variation there. Most of what I saw was in duel, but even within that, you had so many permutations And I think variations that could come out, especially in team or getting someone to focus fire or sort of like change the pace where a whole battle's heading. Really cool stuff.
Yeah, I think there might be more medium weight legs than there are total leg differences in 6 and 5.
Yes.
There actually might be the same number.
Now,
So
some of
it's
that
not saying
could
much
come from
'cause
their
6
goal.
doesn't have any parts.
Because they wanted more unique weapons, right? They wanted to make each weapon in 6 feel way more unique.
Yeah.
And in the interviews, they mentioned that made it hard to balance. And, well,
that's pretty blatant.
That's where we
As
go.
we can see from what we're seeing right now, that's pretty
they weren't
blatant.
lying.
They got it right.
I will say the balance between frames has been good for the most part currently. I think the current balance when it comes to frame parts, you see usually like every frame part with the exception of maybe like a couple of heads for the most part, but weapon balance is, pretty bad right now.
So last question I have for 5th gen for you, Celtic. Just because if I don't ask the question, I feel like we didn't talk about it. So what was the turn speed situation for the different leg types as far as was it just heavies were once again last to the ballroom, or was it more of a mixed bag?
So it depends. The thing with 5th gen is that each category of leg has families within them. And each family specializes in something different. For example, on the lightweight category, you have, I would say, 2 polar opposites. Like there are the Nowaki legs, and then you have the B15 legs. The Nowaki legs specialize in horizontal mobility. However, they trade that horizontal mobility with a really awful turn rate. So you have to make, whenever you use the Nowaki, which is the leg I use usually. So if you ever see me play 5th gen, I'm probably on that leg on a lightweight. You have to make do with a reduced turn speed by virtue of that being the price you pay for all that mobility you get out of it. But then you have the B15, which is the complete opposite. It's the highest turning leg to the point where it goes up to the 1000s in turn speed if you build properly for it. But it's relatively slow compared to the other ones because they're the heavy duty, low defense, but high capacity, high load cap, high turning speed legs. The same is true for heavyweights. Some heavyweights have extremely high turning ability, like the flame heavy. Its whole gimmick
I use
is
those
that
a lot in single player.
Yeah, the flame heavies whole gimmick is that they're extremely slow, tank speed slow. But they are the second highest turning leg for the heavy category. They are only beaten by a single leg in terms of turn speed.
Yeah, those
Then
ones you don't have to
stuff like
backstrafe as much to keep people on your screen then.
Yeah. Then you have stuff like the E38, I think it's called, or E28. We call it the EMA. You will hear a lot of different terms for parts in 5th gen because some people use the AC5 name, so that's just the very good names. So the EMA, for example, have very good mobility. They're really fast, but they trade their mobility for their turn speed. They have relatively low turn speed compared to other legs, and so on and so forth. So each category of leg has this kind of family of legs where they specialize in different things. So turn speed isn't necessarily a guarantee. Turn speed disparity isn't necessarily guaranteed between weight classes because you could have, say, an Owaki leg, lightweight versus a flame heavy. The flame heavy is probably going to turn better overall.
I feel like turn speed is such a big topic. It might be worth touching on a few generations of it and how you would work around it because it might sound scary.
I plan on bringing it up.
If you're used to infinite turn speed, what is it like when you can't necessarily turn as fast as your target moves?
So if you get a 1000 turn speed on the one lightweight, what's the fastest you get on the heavy? Just out of curiosity.
If depending on how light you want to go on a flame heavy, you can get 780 more or less, give or take.
A little over 200 less on the high end. Okay.
Yeah. So the thing with 5th gen is that you can. Well, the thing with Armored Core in general, which is the reason I got really mad with Mr. Skies, and why I was very wordy in my replies in that comment section of that video is that yes, turn speed is like a deciding factor, but there is so many like tools and like things you can do to avoid the situations that he was describing that it's not that big of a deal as he makes it up to be. For example, 5th gen gives you increased turn speed when you wall jump. So when you jump off a building for a few seconds after that, you're gonna turn quicker. You can also do a maneuver we call drift turns, where you slide into the ground, and then if you let go of the movement stick and you turn the camera, your AC will literally drift around, and you get incredibly fast turn speeds.
You can do like
out of it.
360s. It's really
Yeah.
funny.
I remember doing that. That was fun.
Mhm.
If
You can
you're
do it in
fast
4
enough,
too.
you can do it in 4. If you're fast enough, you can do 360s or even more than 360s. You can do 720s on some legs, depending on how fast you're going. Then you have stuff like tanks. Tanks, for example, cannot drift. It's not a mechanic for them. Instead, they get and they also cannot jump from walls, so they also don't get access to the wall jump like turn speed increase. They instead get a buff whenever they are stationary. They can go into like, say, turret mode. It's not really a mode. You're just
Tank mode,
standing
really?
still.
They use their treads like a tank could to
Exactly.
run them both in opposite directions and spin around.
And
real
you
quick.
turn so fast. You're turning almost as fast as some lightweights can move. Out of standing stationary. Obviously, you
At the
never
expense
want to
of
be
not
stationary.
moving horizontally, correct?
Exactly. At the expense of standing still. So there are so many ways. There is so many things that have to go wrong for you to get outflanked that, like, I feel like turn speed being an auto win is just not a thing. At
It's
least
not
not a
true,
thing in
yeah.
it's not true. It's not gonna happen.
Even in the little
Um,
experience I played, like old gen PvP, I never felt like turn speed was the be all end all for anything.
No.
In 4th gen,
It really did not feel that.
in 4th gen you have quick turning. You can quick turn in the air and on the ground. You also have drift turning. You can also control how far you go with a quick turn by using the second staging mechanic. You can also equip a different booster that has a longer duration for the quick boost to extend how far you go during a quick turn. Like, there is so many things you can do.
Yeah, and all these different
Yeah.
mechanics were ways that heavies would overcome their generally lower turn
Yes.
speed.
Yeah.
You also have to consider that something light is probably like low stability, so you're going to stun it with some bazooka or another hard-hitting weapon to prevent it from gaining ground on you, despite it being faster.
Right,
You also
those
have
stuns were less of a damage opening and more of just like arresting your
Yeah.
opponent's movement for position.
Yeah, because they have to stop completely when doing that, so they have to re-accelerate when that happens. So they're an easier target for even longer as well.
You
Rather
have
than just like being I stunned you, now you're screwed.
you also have the map to consider. There are some parts of the maps that allow you to take cover and use that cover effectively to bait an opponent into a bad spot, because if you're like between two buildings, there's only so many angles a lightweight can attack you from.
Exactly.
And stuff like that. There's so many options. So I really do not like how simplified they made it out to be, because it's not. It's very complex. It's a 3-dimensional game. Like,
Right. Yeah, exactly. So let's break TM. I know you're on the 4th gen thing quite a bit. At least you were at one point. I know Dirk, you were too.
A bit, yeah, not as much as a lot of the other guys though.
So it leads to the question. So we got with such a. Anything else you want to mention? 5th gen Pacific, Celtic before I move on from 5th.
Off the top of my head, I don't have anything else to add.
All right. So going over to 4th gen. So we mentioned like options. They're that are 5th gen, also 4th gen both. That were options to get around, some mobility disadvantages that heavyweights may have had. Quick turning, for example, in 4th gen being one of the things. So the question is, they brought all those alternative turning options into 4th and 5th gen. Do you think that was them? Do you think that was maybe from software purposely designing game design to kind of give those mobility options for things with lesser turning speed versus what they had maybe in the Gen 3 era? Or do you think that's just something they decided to add because it was a thing and they wanted to go for like uber fast Gundam style ACs or something?
Probably a bit of both. I'm not the most knowledgeable on Unfortunate. I've played some, probably the first 5 months of AC4, but I know enough to say that they really wanted a game that was more fast paced and quote unquote less clunky. I do hate when people use the term clunky for old AC because I don't think it's clunky at all. But when people say clunky, they usually refer to like sluggish movement, slow
binary
turning,
aiming input,
And controls.
non-analog
especially
aiming.
the controls. They took how many games to get analog support for both
Don't get me
sticks?
started on. I don't know how I managed with that in Silent Line.
Yeah,
Man,
Yeah, I hate when people call those games like clunky because movement in AC in
It's
all
very
generations
crisp.
is extremely sharp and crisp. It's really
When
very,
you
very
PS1,
when
that
you
was
get
blown
in,
Yeah,
away.
it's just different.
when you really get it down, the movement is beautiful in Armored Core.
yeah. It's more like a
It just
dance.
takes a bit to get down.
One thing I've always hated about 4 for Answer, I can't comment on 5 or Verdict Day, and 6 as well, is the regular boost mechanic. It's very floaty, not very responsive. Unlike older AC games, you can literally wiggle in the air, lean forward, lean
Oh, yeah.
backward to dodge shots. Like, you have way more control over your AC, so you feel more like an athlete in your AC or a dancer as opposed to just playing a mech as part of like a simulation, which I think AC6 kind of suffers from. A lot of things are automated, whether it's hard lock, um, infinite turning speed, the floaty boost, and so forth. But for 4 and 4 Answer, yeah, I think there was always a play there with the quick boost and the quick turns. I remember playing some really, really good lightweights in 4 in the early days. Yaka being one of them. He was a savant in Last Raven. But when he played 4,
Booyaka.
Booyaka, yeah. It's funny, like, when he first played 4, he was not very good. And then, like, within 2 days, like one weekend, I played him again and he was, like, just wiping the floor with me. And I asked him, like, how'd you get so good? He just said, oh, I, played for a day or so. That's how much of a
That sounds like
savant
him.
he
Sounds
is.
like
Sounds
him.
like him.
That's
Yep.
very much Yaka. But anyways, like, he would keep me in a flank for so long, probably like 5 to 10 seconds straight. I'm over here trying to quick turn left and right, trying to find him, and he was always one step ahead of me. So it wasn't as simple as like if you were turning faster, you would always, have a flank on your opponent. You have to like be ahead of them in the mental game too. You have to know what they're going to do to like react to you. So
Yeah,
that's
'cause-
very much a dance as well.
Yeah, the game becomes like you use your quick boost to position around your opponent onto their flank and quick turn to get your guns back on target. And as they react to you, you see their AC turn to you, you see them quick turn. That's your signal that you should probably already be on your way to the next flank or, zooming over their head. And because you have to do inputs for each one of those things, it's very tactile.
Right.
Exactly.
So
Yeah.
you say it's like a dance. So you'd say like second and third gen was like a waltz, 4th gen, 5th gen maybe more like a salsa, and then you have like 6th gen is more like a square dance. Is that like a fair comparison?
Yeah, actually,
Yeah,
line
yeah.
dancing.
It's actually like really good.
Yeah, 6 by comparison to like old gen AC, it feels very very rigid. And to me, 6 feels more clunky than old gen AC. But to me, clunky is different than what other people say clunky is.
And
Yeah.
this is so interesting. I think depending where in the spectrum you come from with Armored Core, where you started, there's a lot with movement mechanics and movement physics that you naturally base things off of that you'll come as a comparison point. I know myself, I'm really fond of the AC2 and the 3rd gen. So there's so much that I tend to think about, especially with things like slide jumping and that kind of tech and using overboost to sort of change the narrative of where your movement went. And that's always one of the coolest things about Armored Core. I think it's easy to look at it as just one angle of, okay, well, just turn speed is everything. For example, in AC3, you're going through the arena, you make it up to ace, right? And all of a sudden you see this op-eye design that has crazy turn speed. He's flanking you like crazy. But then you start doing some verses and playing people, and you see them using technique like overboost, and all of a sudden that angle that you thought you had just get turned on a dime. And you don't have it anymore because someone just got behind you and they just moved at just the right angle. Stuff like that. Unbelievably fun. And I always think there's more to that story than just how fast you turn, or just how fast you're moving left or right, or how fast you're going forward.
Yeah. Overboost is probably the best mechanic, I think, of the old school ACs. It's very dynamic in the way you can move your AC with overboost.
Yeah.
You can overboost forward, sideways, even somewhat backwards too, and you can always change direction mid overboost. And this is very fast movement. It's not slow like Assault Boost. It's very quick.
Yeah.
And it's your main tool to counter the position of the person trying to be aggressive and flank you. So with overboost, turn speed, it matters still, but it's not like a guaranteed, hey, I'm going to stay at this person's flank for like 30 seconds straight. It's not like that.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I also know that overboost, I don't know how useful it was in PvP, but I know in 3rd gen there was also like overboost canceling where you could like turn your mech really hard with the strafe and you kind of like do a super walk. You know?
Yeah.
I don't know how useful that was in PvP, but that's another thing to consider about what makes overboost so unique.
Yeah, it's very much. And that's part of the reason why I say it's like a dance, because with strafe sliding out of overboost and jumping out of overboost, it's very mechanical. You're using your legs of your AC to do acrobatics essentially.
Exactly.
Overboost was such a huge mechanic that I didn't truly enjoy playing heavyweights until it was added. So I started with heavyweights in 3rd gen, but when I went back to play 1st gen and there was no overboost, I hated heavies, man.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah, no, I could not play. I only played a heavyweight for like single player AC1. That was like so unfun.
I'll stay.
Like,
I'll stay over
here. Heavies.
I'll stay over in my corner while with my heavy bipeds that I use Exceed Orbit cores with. I didn't use it
all day.
Respect for you for staying dedicated to it. Actually.
Oh yeah. There's something that I forgot to mention when we were talking about maps, and I feel like it's really important to bring it up in comparison to 6, because people who have played 6 and none of the other games probably don't even know that this was a thing before. In AC6, the boundaries are solid. That's not a thing in the older games at all.
Yeah.
You can go out of bounds mid-fight.
Not just horizontally, but vertically, which I think is important to mention as well.
Yeah, you can fly out of the area, or you can just go out of the area. And
I wish AC6 had that.
Me too. I miss it.
Legalize.
You can actually use that to your advantage, because
people who are foolishly fleeing get punished by that instead of just bumped.
Yeah.
So you can prevent people from getting a flank on you by putting yourself between the border and in a corner, and now you're corner boxing, and if they ever try to go for a flank, they just fly out of the map and die.
Or dodge a shot you take at them and all of a sudden they're out of bounds.
Exactly.
Yeah. So stuff like that, you have so many options.
I get why they added it.
Even in the environment to prevent flanks from happening.
I get why they added it from a PvE perspective, because the last thing you'd want is to fail a mission because you went straight out of bounds. And if this is old gen, you would lose money for doing that. But
hey man, how many times I died falling in water? Come on now, give me some credit.
I remember that. But this is why hover legs were invented. But also PvP, it just doesn't work when you have straight boundaries like that. It's also a bit of a fest when it comes to 3v3s, but that's something I'll talk about another time.
So, to kind of establish the question though, so I know from my personal experience, I can't say that I am the one who made it popular or not. I think I came up at the same time, maybe got popularized by some other people. So my general build I ran in 4 and 4 Answer was the bazooka weapon arms with the wing cannons. I called it the stun and whack is what I called it. I don't remember seeing it that often, so I made it more popular, but then again, it might have been a thing on its own. I have no idea. I made that work despite what I called 4th gen introduced what I called lag armor, because 4th gen online was rough, especially in the early days, where essentially what all I remember seeing a lot in 4th gen, I know it may have changed in recent years. Actually, there's a question that I'm going to bring up later. I remember basically going against nonstop against uber lightweight double assault riflers. That's essentially all I ever saw all day long for the longest time in PvP in 4th gen. And then I know some things changed here and there, like white lock blading. There was some other stuff like that too. So so those of you who are more inundated in the 4th gen PvP scene, what was the meta, quote unquote, or the popular archetypes at that point?
So that's a tricky question because it depends on who you ask.
Let's say 1.4. Let's assume 1.4 regulation, if that makes sense.
What I mean by that is that different communities have different metas, and by that I mean different platforms. For example, PS3 had a different, more or less meta than Xbox, and PS3 also has a Japanese community.
Yeah,
Yes.
PS3 was more laser rifle, and Xbox was more like second stage, quick boost all the time, use rifles all the time.
Right.
The main thing is that usually the Xbox side is way more mobility focused because their controller is better at second staging than the PS3 one.
Yes,
it is a controller diff.
Yes, PS3 trigger was bad. Very bad.
Even the difference in the controller influenced how the meta evolved.
That's hilarious.
And the PS3 side is more like laser rifle or sniper cannon things oriented. Like it's more like
high velocity weapons.
Yeah, high velocity gun oriented.
Like things that went through net lag, basically.
Yeah.
Like
do you want me to?
Heads.
Yeah. Those were very common even in Xbox.
T-tone. The what's it? The rail gun.
The rail gun.
I remember the rail gun.
Oh yeah.
Do you want me to go over the netcode for each game? Because I'm very familiar with them, so that everyone is on the same page.
I would love to chat about 4th gen netcode when we get to it.
I would love to talk about that too, except that's going to fit in the context of this conversation. Maybe we'll have, I'm enjoying this so much already.
Yeah.
Like seriously,
I'm down.
Getting to uber nerd out on a super long Armored Core conversation is like a favorite new thing I might have to start doing. So maybe we'll go back and talk about netcode in another day. But that actually sounds like something I would like to cover because that sounds interesting.
I would listen happily.
All right.
So
when the time comes.
I played only PS3. I didn't play the Xbox side of 4th gen. I had no idea that the play styles because of the controller. The metas were that different between the two ends. That's insane to me.
So that's why I can't second stage as a PS3 player.
Exactly. It's also there are also some.
I was wondering why am I?
Yeah. So
there's some playstyle rules as well. Because of the hardware itself. For example, stuff like plasma and destroying buildings and stuff like that will dip the frame rate to really bad levels in PS3.
Kojima cannons?
Not really Kojima. It's just that plasmas have a lingering effect. So if you start spamming plasma, you're going to tank everyone's frame rate. So stuff like that is usually not seen that much on the PS3 side. Meanwhile, the Xboxes just run perfectly all the time, so you don't deal with those issues.
Mm-hmm.
What I'm hearing is I picked the wrong console to play 4th gen on is what I'm hearing.
Even something as even the controller and the console itself was influencing how those games were played, basically.
And blades, dude. Oh my god, the instant transmission jitsu.
Oh man.
Yeah, that's what I was talking about, blading.
Gen was so crazy.
It's Ultra Instinct before Ultra Instinct became a thing.
No,
the netcode couldn't handle it. It was simply too much speed. You had players going upwards of
it's
1400.
Gotta go fast on crack, and the next thing you know, you're across the map. It's.
So the funny thing is that it wasn't just the netcode not being able to keep up. It was a combination of factors that makes you teleport horribly. And I'm gonna be honest, straight up, 4th gen has a myriad of bugs. I could be listing bugs for days that influence how you build. Even the bugs of the game influence how you end up building in that game. It's that bad.
It was so ambitious, but you can really tell they were a smaller company at the time.
I'll add that to the talking list.
And you just have to look at the world design to really confirm that.
So it's stuff like using the classic everyone runs their blades on the left side, right? For some reason, left-sided weapons are bugged in 4th gen. If you don't have anything on your right side of your AC, your left arm weapons will never lock on.
You're out of sync the whole time.
Out of sync, yeah, I remember that a little bit. Yeah.
So on your end, you're gonna be shooting normally, but on your opponent's screen, you're gonna be shooting at nothing because you're not synced. If you do that with blades, every time you use the blade, the enemy screen is not gonna know what's happening because they think, oh, he's not logging onto me. So you start teleporting everywhere because the game is confused to what to do. So they it would instantly try to fix your position after you do a blade launch, and that just creates a lot of teleporting, and it's really bad.
Weapon arms are superior is what I'm hearing. I made a good choice.
So
there are a lot of like
as far
stuff
as
like that.
weight
that
goes, though, in 4th gen.
Yeah, wait, like what do you see
duels,
build wise? Yeah, I'm
I
curious.
play like I play something on like the heavier side of medium as far as bipeds go, and like with that kind of build, I basically have to bring a mix of weapons. I have a sniper cannon, I have a bazooka, I have a machine gun, and I
Yeah.
have a grenade launcher, so that I can handle lightweights kiting. I can try to snipe them and then jump into cover. But when someone's close, I can do the DPS.
So a lot of basically every leg is more than viable in every leg class is more than viable in Fortune. And like you mentioned, for example, something heavier will want. I always think of it as controlling a space, and each leg wants to control space in a different way. For example, a lightweight
Yeah.
doesn't really need a sniper rifle. First of all, if it ever tries to trade a sniper shot with a heavyweight, it will always lose. You're taking like 3k damage, the heavyweight's taking 1k. Like you're taking like triple the damage the heavyweight's taking. You're not gonna win that trade. You already have less health to begin with. So you want to control space, but since you're a lightweight, you're fast. You can control space by you yourself moving around. A heavyweight build wants to control space, but it cannot really move anywhere because you're a heavy boy. You cannot just instantly zoom around like a lightweight can. However, you can afford to bring heavier cannons, heavier weapons that have more range, and that way you start controlling a space with your weapons instead of your own mobility.
I never saw tanks in 4th gen.
That's
like,
funny.
I don't think I ever these things may have changed. It was actually a conversation I'll get later. But when I played 4th gen, I don't ever remember running into a tank online. Like not even once.
Right now, the current what is considered to be the current strongest build ever you could possibly make that almost has no counterplay is a tank. Funnily enough.
Now that's actually a question I'm going to ask later about people who still play the older gen games now.
Mm-hmm.
What's the meta now versus what it was when the game got released? That's a question I do plan on bringing up later.
So on the topic of controlling space, I mentioned this is what makes tanks really strong in Fortune. Their gimmick is null now. Everyone can bring cannons, so their firepower advantage is no longer a thing, like it was in the older games, like it is in 5th gen. They no longer have that special quality to them, because even a lightweight can bring a grenade launcher now.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
So to compensate, they made it so that tanks can now bring any gun, anything in their hanger slot. They can basically have pocket grenade launchers if they wanted to. They can have anything in the game except for a back cannon in their pockets, ready to be used at any point. So you essentially have 6 entire guns on your AC versus everyone else's 4. And this is very important when it comes to controlling a space, because like you mentioned, you have a sniper cannon, you have a machine gun, you have a grenade and a bazooka, right? Well, now add all of those 4 weapons, and on top of that, a laser rifle, a railgun. You can add another missile launcher. You can have basically anything at your disposal. You're a walking armory. You're essentially never going to run into a bad matchup because you have a tool for any single situation. You can start with 2 rails, deplete the rails, put them away. You have 2 grenade launchers. You have a machine gun and a shotgun. You have anything you could think of, you can put in there, except for missiles. But that's a bug. Don't worry about it.
More bugs.
But you have so much.
Put the missiles on the outside.
So much.
There you go.
Yeah, basically, you start with the missiles and then you just transition to guns instead of the other way around. So you're a walking armory. That's what makes tanks so special. And
sounds like I need to revisit 4th gen.
At first glance, you wouldn't think that is so powerful, but overall, in a game about controlling space, having those extra guns is huge. You can start with 2 railguns and take instantly 6 to 7 or 8k off of a lightweight on round start because you just sniping with the railguns. And then you can put the railguns away, and now you have another set of weapons that you can use for another situation or another matchup. You can tanks benefit a lot from matchup knowledge because you can discard weapons you're not going to use. So if you run into another heavyweight, for example, you might not want to start trading sniper shots because none of you are going to go anywhere. Might as well deplete, take them away, and start with a different weapon. Bring 2 laser rifles. that are stored in your hangar and use that against the heavyweight. Or you're gonna be fighting a lightweight. Maybe that heavy duty like bazooka and grenade kind are not gonna be that useful because the lightweight just moves too fast. So you can just discard them, pull out a machine gun. Machine gun and sniper cannon, secretly top tier CQC combo. You wouldn't expect them to combo well, but they do. You just go to
I
town
remember
with a
putting like
single
sniper
machine
cannon
gun
in that game.
and
I
a
remember
sniper
doing
cannon. And now you're infinitely lighter because you discarded your other weapons and stuff like that. Like tanks are, I don't like this term, but they are the thinking man's like AC because they
like
are
it.
basically an armory, and how effective that armory is depends on your knowledge of the game and what you're fighting. And like people will look at your number, at the number of your AP, and instantly recognize what AC you're bringing. Like it's
So-
that like
Totally.
people can look at your AC and recognize it from the other side of the map, and they will use that information to like select what weapons they want to use inside the match itself.
So you're saying theoretically, if someone were to host a big tournament for Answer or for and make it build lock, that other archetypes would suffer from potential bad matchups, but the tank would be the smart choice because they can prepare for any matchup. So in a big tournament, hypothetically, you'd see most people run a big tank then because it's more diverse in its playstyle.
Yes, roughly you can make up for a bad matchup in any AC, assuming
Yeah.
you can play well. But if you wanted to have a situation where you know for a fact you're bringing the most amount of tools to use,
Mm-hmm.
you want a big toy box, and you never want to be in a situation where you lost because you didn't bring the correct equipment.
Mm-hmm.
Bringing a tank is the best choice for coverage.
Makes sense.
Okay, so with tanks being like an arsenal basically, but naturally being a bit slower, like basically comes down to if you're a lightweight in that matchup with the AP disadvantage, because in that game you don't start out with even score.
Yes.
You have to dive in on them. What do you
Yes.
do about that? What's the play? Is it a stat check?
You will think it's a stat check, but you have to. So the way I see it, and I try to illustrate it this way: whenever you're heavy, you basically have like you're a black hole. You're sucking like people into your range. And you have to use that to your advantage in order to win the matchup. So obviously, if you try to like chase a lightweight, it's happening now in AC6. That is the meta for 1v1s basically. You bring a heavyweight, you lose to a kite build. That's usually what's happening. In the other games, that would never happen because the kite build, they have to come to you. If the timer runs out and you have more AP than them from the beginning, because it's not percentage based in the older games, it's always the hard number. So they have to come to you. You have to use that to your advantage. However, what you will think that is extremely powerful, the moment you lose that AP lead, the moment your AP goes lower than the enemy, they control the fight now. The spotlight is on their AC, not on yours. So if you're in a situation where you get rushed by a lightweight, and the lightweight like instantly takes like 8 to like 7k off of you with a good rush, and you lose your AP lead, now you're in big trouble because you're heavy, you're clunky, you're like you're never gonna catch them. If they decide to run, you're not gonna catch them. So while you start the match winning, the game becomes more about maintaining that advantage instead of generating it. Meanwhile, lighter ACs are much better at generating advantages while being worse at keeping the advantage, because a single shot takes like 10% of your health versus a single shot from that you hit a tank. It's only going to take like 3 or 5%. So it becomes a dynamic between, do you want to front load your advantage at the beginning of the match and thus become a heavyweight, or do you want to not front load your advantage but make it so that you have the tools to create that advantage for later in the match, and then you become better at late game in comparison to a tank? Because the moment a lightweight gets AP lead, the world is their toolbox. They get so much, like they can do whatever they want basically, because they can use position. They can be anywhere at any time.
Right.
They can position themselves much more fluently.
Right,
And that's one of the things
significantly
that
faster, so they would just
Yeah.
run. You'd never catch them.
That's an incredible mechanic that I've never seen other games do, where like you can fine tune so many things, including how you want to win, to the point where like I said, you can either front load your advantage and start the match winning, or make it so that your AC is better at creating that advantage instead of maintaining it, and so on and so forth.
And
So in
that's
that situation,
for every Armored Core game, right? Besides 6, right? I'm not mistaken
it's
on that. It's every
basically
single one.
It's basically every single one. So in that situation, yes, the lightweight has to come to the tank, but they get a huge payoff if they successfully attack the tank and gain AP lead, and get a good position and so on.
Now, I think that's an idea they did try to bring into 6. I do recognize it, and that's the ricochet system. You would think with a heavier AC, if they're going to bounce at a shorter range than you, that should bring them into your reach. Except missiles exist, so like,
Yeah, the problem is ricochet doesn't exist for missiles.
Problem is explosives. Period. If it's explosive, it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
And the worst part is that even if a ricochet happens, if that ricochet still does damage, then you already lost your health advantage in a single shot. Even if it was
true,
one
yeah.
health.
You could mitigate some of that with some of the maps in the old map pool with like Xylem, with the buildings to hide behind and whatnot, and with the old VPN tanks could sometimes use to catch rats, but generally speaking, if you have the lead as a rat, you win, and you start the game with the lead anyways.
yeah, changing the scoring system really did change quite a bit.
Yes.
It did.
That's actually my plan I'm bringing up later, so let's not get ahead of ourselves.
Sorry.
No worries. No,
No.
that just shows great minds think alike. Let's just put it that way. How about that? So anyone else anything they want to
Absolutely.
cover specifically with 4th gen? Like as far as game balance goes, turning
Missiles.
or missiles. Okay, go ahead.
Missiles, yes.
Good pick.
Missiles exist in 4th gen. There are missile
Yes.
launchers in 4th gen that can fire more missiles in a volley than you can fire at once in 6. And yet, they weren't really that much of a problem.
So
Right.
yeah, that's a good point, because something that we're lacking, we have it, but it's really not great. One thing that we're lacking in 6 is a good countermeasure tool. We basically had that in
100%,
every other game. Like in 4th gen, you have flares. If there's a huge missile ball incoming, you press one button, your AC throws their flares out. The missiles are tracking the flares now, not you.
Yep.
5th
3rd gen, you've got the gun on your AC. Like that gun in the front of your AC, that has a purpose.
In
Yeah,
3rd gen,
you have
AMS.
MSG response. You have
You
you
extensions as
innately,
well.
yeah,
if
you
really need
innately
it.
have like a passive defense system. You also have an active defense system in the insides. You
Yeah,
can
the
bring
decoys.
the
Deeks.
Yeah, you have
decoys.
decoys.
Classic Deeks.
Oh my god, the silent line decoys!
Silent. You mean the
I'm
silent?
gonna open
Those
a
were-
trauma box.
You mean the
with
silent
those.
line Deeks that could, just
Block
vortex
grenades.
the grenades? Yeah.
Yeah.
Those were so. I remember that too.
Yeah,
Like,
This
how
tiny,
insane they were.
tiny Pokeball looking thing to
Yeah.
block a big, massive fireball like 4 times bigger than your AC.
In 5th gen, you have a really powerful one. You have the Seaweeds, the close-in weapon system. It's basically a gun in your shoulder that automatically shoots missiles down, with a 92% interception rate, by the way.
Jeez.
And then you have in 6 a tiny grenade launcher that shoots chaff.
Right.
Um,
and
That's what, that's what dodging is for.
There's
The
really
only-
2 things missing. The radar in 4th gen. And older armor cores too. You can see missiles on your radar.
you can
Yeah.
see missiles
Yeah.
in your radar
Dodge
too.
them
We don't have
because
that.
Missiles
had
require a
a-
specific movement pattern.
Yes.
That and dodging in AC6 isn't anywhere near as robust as old school AC or 4th gen, I'd say.
Yeah,
You
unless
have quick boost, but it's very inefficient for the most part, unless you're running on the
yeah.
ground with Santai Alula.
pretty much the only thing that can reasonably dodge missiles in the air is a super lightweight, which that's like the bare minimum of what you need for missiles to matter. If you're a heavyweight, you have really no way to dodge missiles aside
Right.
from cover.
Right.
Which
And the other thing
what
to
cover
mention,
we have, which isn't a lot on most maps.
Because the
Yeah.
map pool right now is very open and rat oriented.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I'm
another
so
thing to
sick of
mention,
playing the space map in 3s, man. It's just
oh my
wide
god,
open.
that is space map in duels is horrendous.
And
Lots
the
of-
the
hate
ceiling
it.
the ceiling has no limit, I swear.
And the other thing to mention about
That
that little
black
chaff
thing too,
launcher,
man.
is that it procs on you too.
Correct.
So
Right.
you also lose your own FCS
Yeah.
if you ever like fly into it. So it's like
Yeah.
we need flares, man. I miss my
Fl-
flares.
I think flares would have actually fixed quite a bit of problems with this game.
And to
It's like-
to add insult to injury, sorry to interrupt, the
Yeah, go
PCA
ahead.
crafts have flares.
They do have flares. That is true.
Yeah.
It's literally they have it in the game. They could easily add it to its low key.
They just added them. They just gave it to your enemies to like rub it in that you don't have access to them for some
No,
reason.
actually,
It's
and
really
I
annoying.
don't see them adding an entirely new like slot. So knowing FromSoft, if they ever add flares, it's going to be like a back weapon, for example, or something like that, not like an extension.
Well,
Yeah.
Which it's something, which is better than nothing, but still.
what's dumb is many of the arm parts, the actual physical models, they have like little holes on their shoulders.
Those are thrusters. I've
No,
checked.
they have thrusters. No,
Dirk sounds so defeated. Those
no,
are
no.
thrusters.
No.
I've checked.
No, I mean, knowing what he has to deal with, it makes sense. Go
No,
ahead.
some have thruster holes below the main hole up top. Like some have a single hole up top and like two holes below where the flames come out. Like I've actually gone into training mode and done the camera thing to see where the flames come out. But some arms still have holes on the sides where no flame comes out. And like during the trailers and first like gameplay footage of Armored Core 6, I was like kind of teased so hardcore, thinking like, oh, we get extensions. I see the little shoulder mount, but we never got them.
Oh, I know what those are. Those are for the shoulder, excuse me, the shoulder brackets in the garage.
When
and the
they lift
helicopter.
you up. Yeah, that's true. That's true.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think the best way to put missiles in this game is when your best way to deal with them, aside from cover, is pulse protection. You know you have a missile problem in the game. That's like technically
Yeah.
the best way to deal with missiles is pulse protection. And you know dang well I am not bringing pulse protection in either 1v1s or 3v3s.
Yeah, so like 4th gen missiles weren't really a problem, even though you had like basically enough to
No,
kill
missiles were
you
strong.
flying at you at any time. Like if you
Yeah.
stand still against a missile in that game, it's over. It is
That
so
game
over.
had the-
Yeah.
That game had the one-shot missiles. I remember that.
One
Like the
Yeah, that's right. You had the ones from FA, but then I know early on in 4, you had like the muscle shell and stuff like that. You could just volley after volley after volley after volley of missiles.
We
And
also had release saline. I remember that too. We
And
were
let's
hearing about that at least.
Let's not forget 4 was also, to my memory, the only Armored Core game where you could actually lock onto missiles, like individual
Yeah, you could
missiles, and
shoot
like
'em
pop them
down.
out of the air.
Really?
That was wild.
Yeah.
I actually didn't know
I
that.
hated that, man. It made
Oh,
trying to find
dude.
opponents sometimes so much of a hassle.
Getting
Yeah.
your hardlock pulled by a missile
Yeah,
is
yes,
so bad.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
But hatching them is so good.
Yeah. Oh yeah, on the
Played that
topic of
one mission in
missiles,
Last Raven.
this is also kind of important to mention when we were going over the fact that even the hardware can affect the meta. Funnily enough, on PS3, missiles are weaker because the missiles will saturate the frame rate, and the lower the frame rate is, the lower the damage you take.
So it's like
funny.
damage per frame calculation.
Yes, any explosive relies on the
Ah.
frame rate to like how many ticks like hit your AC. So
That's
a lower frame
hilarious.
rate will give you a lower tick rate and thus
Yep.
reduce the damage of the missiles. Or
Yeah,
It's the
grenades.
same reason why quad blading is so dangerous. The thrust of the blade keeps the blade inside the enemy, making it do way more damage than it says it does.
Yeah, will take more than like usual. So yeah, even something like as innocuous as the frame rate that you would never expect it to affect like the stuff, like it actually matters a lot.
Yeah, actually,
Also-
many of the Japanese devs they still like code and base their game around frame rate.
Yes.
That-
As a
that's
fun
why,
fact,
like-
if you unlock the frame rate, it affects bullet drop. So if you have like a monster PC and you decide to uncap the frame rate to max, your bullets will just fall out of the barrel directly to the ground.
That sounds like a fun glitch fit to bring out later. I'm gonna have to addendum this to if heavy versus lightweight, it put like a red like clearance sticker on that says sort of. Because
Can
not
we talk about lightweights and heavyweights and missiles in 4th gen? Because that's kind of where I wanted to go.
I know.
Oh yeah,
that's what
that's
I'm
a
gonna say.
good point to bring.
I'm not complaining. I said I'm not gonna try to control the conversation. I'm gonna let it go wherever it goes. But I am gonna try to bring it back on topic once in a while. So yeah, what do you mean by missiles heavy light? Go ahead.
Right. So we have these tools to deal with missiles in 4th gen. We have the flares and we have our radar. So as a lightweight, right, you're fast enough to dodge missiles. That's pretty much universal in 4th gen. If you're a lightweight, you can dodge the missiles. So you don't need flares, right? You can just save that weight or use it for something else. But on my like heavier one that I play, I bring flares. I bring flares every time, no matter what.
That's an extremely good point to bring.
And if my opponent doesn't have them, I purge them, right? But it's having that option there gives not only build diversity, but also helps a specific weapon type from invalidating a weight class.
So depending on the game, because 4 and 4 answer are different, obviously. Flares are a must in each game, in both games. Like they're basically a must for heavyweights and tanks, because otherwise you're just gonna get missiled to death. Your mobility is just not fast enough to like get away from them, unless you use overboost, which is the one use case for overboost. So you won't see, you won't often see like heavyweights with relation missiles. Unless you're that guy and you're like that good that you can evade every missile on a heavyweight, you're not gonna see like relation missiles, which means that your missiles as a heavyweight are usually weaker than a lightweight, because a lightweight can bring the missile on top of a relation missile. And there is also this mechanic where you can accelerate the missile with your own movement to give it better tracking, better speeds. Some missiles,
Yep.
Some missiles are straight up like not real unless you accelerate them.
Big Sue.
Like the Big Sue. That's a good one. But other missiles don't require that. For example, the Wheelings or the Osagi in AC4, the Osagi, the God missile. Those missiles don't require you to accelerate them, so a heavyweight can make use of them. So it adds a lot to the build diversity that each like build has different like tools they can access and how well they can play them, because the game won't deny you the ability to equip whatever you want. But some stuff is better used in others. For example, the Vixu, like you're not gonna make use of a Vixu in a heavyweight. It's gonna be really hard. Chances are that you're gonna try to shoot it, and then someone is just gonna destroy it in front of your face, and you're gonna blow yourself up because you're just that slow. So yeah, that's an interesting point to make, because since heavies have to bring flares or require you. Actually, I don't want to say have, like it's a hard rule, but
for the average player, I think anyone listening to this who picks the game up after listening, you're gonna need it.
They benefit more from flares than they do from relation missiles. So usually you're not gonna bring a missile on a heavyweight, because since you don't have relations, they're less effective than they would be on a lightweight. Since lightweight can evade missiles on their own, you can bring relation missiles, and now you have a much better missile platform.
So then, considering our options in 6 for that same relationship of like missiles and dealing with them as an AC that can't realistically dodge them all the time, in 6 our option is what? Shield, right? I think that's like
pretty much
one of the few ways besides dodging you can deal with missiles.
It's one of the many reasons why shields are really popular to heavyweights.
But that's DPS loss, right? On a AC that's meant to be heavier and do more damage, it's a tough choice that I think flares would help a lot with.
Not only that, but
absolutely.
Since this patch added the pulse missiles, you can no longer like 100% reliably use shield a missile, because
that is also very true.
Unless you use Coral Shield, because it doesn't care.
So you old geners then,
but that also got hard nerfed too. So
is this a relationship that existed in 3rd gen too, and earlier, Cleric and Xeno?
No, decoys. Decoys are where it was at. I mean, you had obviously the AMS core in 3rd gen, but super decoys were nuts in especially Silent Line. Now, Nexus 3 less Raven?
I can talk about that. So, in Nexus 9 Breaker, missiles were really, really strong. So, decoys, you pretty much always wanted to ran. Verts, Nymphy missiles, even the starter missiles.
I remember the starter missiles.
I love the starter missile, the goat.
Yeah,
They
probably
lock
the
on so fast.
Yeah, and they're very light. They're very low impact. Probably the best missile in Ninebreaker though is the Spartoy. It's a dual missile launcher.
Oh, let's
Yep,
go Spars.
Spartoy.
That's mine. Yep.
And in those games, the combination of your ACs having this humongous hitbox and their Spartoys being able to like actually circle back around and hit you from behind made them just super obnoxious and super powerful. So you pretty much always wanted to run decoys. Unless you're Japanese, for some reason they don't run decoys, but they play way different than we do. They tend to play at max range and very passive. Like they find a way to time each other out in Ninebreaker, which is unbelievable.
I was having that Biden. I never ran decoys, just to be honest with you. I didn't. I fell in love with an inside part I loved too much that I couldn't not bring myself not to use it.
Urchins.
Yeah, Urchin's very fun. Especially in Nexus Ninebreaker, one hit, you're pretty much gen busting the other person because the heat output is ridiculous. And in those games, you have no energy, and heat is very much a factor. In Last Raven, missiles, it's tricky. Like, they're not as upfront devastating as Ninebreaker and Nexus, but they're tricky, powerful because you don't really respect them as much. You don't bring decoys.
Precisely.
So pretty much a lot of high-level Last Raven games come down to who gets tagged the most by the ARM 3 extensions the most. So, like, one ARM 3 extension Sabo can take off, like, close to 1,000 AP off your AC. And that can be the difference between a win and a loss. And that's been especially apparent in the two big tournaments LCC and I ran on my YouTube channel. We ran these fantasy tournaments where we play ACs that people made for us to use. So like we kind of do a proxy tournament. And the matches pretty much came down to like who hits the most ARM 3 extensions. So missiles are still strong in a way in Last Raven too. Especially the vertical missiles. Those are probably the best like chip missile in the game. You can use them behind cover. They track really well. They hit hard for like at least 500 AP per hit, and they last the whole match because there's 24 of those things. So in all three of those games, missiles are extremely powerful, I'd say.
Definitely. And I want to piggyback off of that too. I think is from an old gen, especially even all the way back to Gen 2 and during 3. In a lot of ways, missiles had some of the most diverse play then, some of the most interesting things. It wasn't always about mass lock volleys or like the next volley of 12 or the next sequential swarm. You had interesting tactics. Sometimes people would bring, for example, in AC3, this is pretty common, come in overweight, bring the RM extension with the 2-shot multi-missile that's split into 8. So the idea was you would come in and just unleash a huge volley from that range, just fire both of them off and then just immediately purge. Other examples were if you'd bring GAR extensions, GAR 2 I believe, in with the orbit missile launcher. If you were fast enough to ride your extension button, and if you tapped it, you could fire a volley of 6 extensions, right? And then you'd have your 3 orbits come out. And it was super sneaky because your opponent would assume, well, are you using something like almost like a Nymphy-like launcher? But then the 3 orbits appear and start following them around. Things like that I haven't seen happen again in AC. And I just think that open ability, not just for the back missile units, but for the extensions, what you could run, were just really, really, really cool. Later on, we'd see hand missiles start to become more of a thing. I think Gen 5 really brought this up more with the deployable pods, and then now here in 6, we're pretty full on board with hand missiles in some ways running right on par with something you see in a back unit.
Pretty dang good. They're pretty dang good.
Pretty amazing.
In some ways better.
I can't stand pulse missiles on 3s now. Like the impact.
They're brutal. They're brutal.
Insane.
MLT4 as well has been one of the best weapons in a while.
Yeah, that stuff coming from off screen is real rough.
The MLT4 has so much instant stuff.
It's a little bit more balanced in 1v1s just because you can actually pay attention to them and they're relatively easy to dodge compared to auto missiles. But in 3s, like firing 2 at once, that's already almost a lightweight staggered.
Yeah, just give me back my missile radar and that won't be
the only thing that can like, come close to that with like 2 weapons is like 2 Zimmermans. And that's ridiculous when we were talking about missiles.
Well, speaking of Zimmermans, the Javelin beta missiles are basically Zimmermans. You're just flinging off Zimmermans from like max range.
That's a good way to put it.
They do like 800 impact per missile. That's basically a pre-patched Zimmerman, and you're doing it from like 300 meters away.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So I can speak more. I didn't use missiles. I mean, that's ever Nexus. Nexus, I love the dual verts.
Yeah,
Dual verts my favorite in Nexus a lot. I know in like 3 and like SL especially. I don't know. This is the big question I want to bring up later, but we can maybe even talk about it now if you want to. I know I've been running heavy biped essentially since 3. That's like been my primary in like all the games as heavy biped for the most part. Although I am becoming more and more of a perennial wheelchair user at 6, but it's
now you have the air chair.
Wheelchairs are fun.
They're fun.
Oh my god, those legs! I hate them.
Yeah, they keep getting nerfed, yet I still keep finding myself using them. I'm
They're
still trying to
fun.
find a
I
heavy
don't really-
biped I really like, but I know in SL, for example, the high ACT missiles were just devastating in that game. High ACTs they just didn't miss. Like if you were reasonably quick, they just didn't miss. But something I thought was fun, interesting play. So you know with the TM or the triple missiles, triple missiles. Something I actually found that actually surprised people who would try to rush me down as a heavy to kind of get around my space is that I would actually fire those point blank. Like they fired straight
They do a
ahead,
ton of damage.
and so it was actually a fairly good CQC weapon, which I thought was hilarious.
Almost like a modified rocket.
Almost like that, yeah. Except actually some lock onto it too. So, I saw more missile play on heavier ACs in the early 3rd gen before we got the 3.5. Let's just call it 3.5. But that's because I saw more people running like OpI and stuff with like laser cannons and GNLs is what I saw more in the competitive scene at that point.
Oh, that's right. You guys ran OpI sometimes in the Midwest scene, didn't you?
Yeah,
Yes.
in fact,
Holy.
our main tournament for Armored Core Midwest Mayhem was both OpI and non-op were allowed. So, of course, given as you'd push through the day and you'd hit, get to semifinals and then finals, of course, you were going to be seeing a lot of OpI designs. And there was a lot of OpI LQ-15, laser cannon, plenty.
Yeah.
Plenty of chain gun play, some GNL, but I remember a lot more LQ-15 and chain gun especially. Those were just prolific. Like,
Well, chain gun was like a sniper rifle back in those games. It was like a solid bead, like a laser.
Oh,
Had no
that
spread
thing
whatsoever.
Oh, it didn't. I mean, that's why it really threw me off in the late parts of 3rd gen, seeing the chain gun kind of have a staggered stream. That was strange because that thing was bullet just accurate when it started. And you got enough of a good clip on someone if they had poor solid defense and you caught them running a cooling chain. That was definitely a burn.
Yeah, in many ways, FromSoft was bad about doing overcorrections in their game design. Like they paid attention to the PvP scene in Japan, especially.
Right.
So Nexus was like a direct, like consequence of Silent Line. They made the lockboxes way smaller. Your left handgun actually affected your lockbox size. They wanted like heat to be a thing because in Silent Line you can abuse OB, you can use the highest output generator. But they went too far with it, and it was like until Last Raven they finally got a bit less extreme, but it's still nowhere near Silent Line standards. And one of the changes they made was the chain gun. Even by Last Raven, the chain gun was still just it sprayed. It didn't like have a laser.
Would you say it was a shell of its former self?
Yeah, I'd say so. Yeah, although in Nexus 9-breaker, the M2 was still very strong. The handheld chain gun.
Yeah,
that is
M2
true. Yes.
solid.
Yeah,
and I remember I think Claire and I memed about chain gun becoming the mag or the clip gun. It was just so odd to have. It's like, wait, like we can't even like full auto with this.
It's not a chain gun anymore.
No,
exactly.
Yeah.
The chains are too short.
Yeah.
So we kind of already talked about 3rd gen a little bit. We'll go to 3rd gen here. There is a pretty distinct difference between like SL versus Last Raven, for example. Like they're basically completely different games. As far as the scene goes and weapons and options and how played. But that being said, so the term I've always used for movement in 3rd gen, some people like they don't have. I agree. I don't like the term clunky either. The term I use for 3rd gen movement is deliberate.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
the movement in the 3rd gen is very deliberate. Like you can deliberately maneuver how you want to make your things go. Like this man here, Zealous, made me really good at dodging GNLs because if I didn't, I would die. The prolific GNL user over here, so I got really good at twitch dodging with my heavies for that reason. But it's I think the Midwest scene was a fair bit different than the West Coast as a whole, and and even we were different than the Japanese players. So so far as like heavy versus light, I know from my experience, like Zealous, you can correct me where I might be misremembering here.
Sure.
Aside from, shall we say, I would say probably Ninebreaker and Last Raven.
Mm-hmm.
And that's because people love to do underweighted FA legs, which I almost even consider that heavyweight. They were heavy bipeds, but the way people ran them, they were essentially middleweights or almost lightweights. The way they ran them,
they're more midweight than the S3 legs, which are midweights, but those are actually
exactly. So I don't even consider that heavyweight in all honesty, because people basically ran them like they were like lighter end midweights. But that being said, like we didn't see much heavy play outside of jousting tanks, on the SL side, or me and my big old burly heavy bipeds in Silent Line I carried all the way through for the most part. But that was the Midwest scene. It was almost entirely reverse joints and lightweight midweights but especially with OPI, with like, you know, LQ15s and chain guns in the original gen. We had people who end up going meat shield later with jousting tanks a little bit, with like a solid shield and what you call the MG800, like not the 800, because that one got banned. The 1000.
One G1K.
But then Nexus, we had a little bit of heaviers, but still not really. Not till Ninebreaker or Last Raven really start seeing heavies start being used. But did you remember seeing tanks used very much in Nexus through Last Raven and RC? Because I don't remember tanks being around very much.
I could talk to it a bit. I mean, usually what you'd see, especially in the early ACMMs, I mean, when you got towards the last few builds, like in the finals and stuff, they normally weren't the tanks that were making, but the ones that were there, the genuine heavy builds. I remember, for example, Mayhem and Baker. We had a father-son duo in the Midwest. It was the coolest thing. It was like his dad was 50-something. He had his son. We used to call his son Baker, a new type. It was just little like 10-year-old kid that came in with rolling a shotgun on like heavyweight with like dual verts and everything, and then he had a special design that he used with his dad when they were in team tournaments. You know, so occasionally you would see a design like that pop up that would just try to overwhelm you with missiles, or like a tank missile boat, classic stuff. You know, we've seen this before. You know, I mean, AC2, like, you know, the Lagfest with the multi-missile tank. You can go back even further and see this in older AC games, but to that extent, they existed. I think around the age out in the West Coast, there were some people that became aware of kind of the cask builds and things like that, and then people started to pay more attention to joust builds. I know for a fact Harlequin ran a joust tank with chain gun and GNL with turn boosters, and I mean that was, of course, the core of it. That was the whole point. You'd run in and you'd hopefully get a multi-point run and drop some huge cannon shots in your opponent. But that was really late gen SL. The majority of it, like Cleric was saying, lots of lightweights, lots of mids, and especially when people could get away with OPI, of course. You know, very light and very fast with laser cannons and that nature.
Yeah, because you're taking away the main advantage of a tank with OPI. You know, tanks can fly in the air with cannons and still lock onto you.
Exactly.
So unfortunately, PD Penguin Deuce couldn't make it, but he did give me his notes, so I can tell you guys the results from the California tournaments, the in-person tournaments there, from MLC 1, which is AC2, through MLC 5, which is Nexus, and some Last Raven stuff too. I'll keep it on Gen 3 and 3.5 right now, just because we're on there.
Sure.
But as far as like light versus heavyweights, for MLC 3, it was an AC3 tournament. First place was Oliver. He was probably the best.
God, Oliver.
Yeah, he was
The greatest.
The greatest, yeah, the legend, the man himself. Probably the best overall AC player in the States for all of Gen AC. And he's a legend because all he uses is just one single Kurosawa.
Yeah.
Nothing else. So for him, it's purely basics. You want to talk about like deliberate movement in old gen? That's Oliver. Anyways, so MLC 3, first place was Oliver. He used a gouged midweight, and by gouged I mean like a midweight that kind of maximizes on AP and defense for its speed. With just the Sawa.
If
you're running just a Kurosawa, you can do that.
Yeah. So he has a midweight, but it had like over 9,000 AP, which is like heavyweight standards.
A ton.
And then second place was Watcher, which ironically is Oliver's brother. So
I actually didn't know that.
Yeah, that's his brother. So you got two brothers that are probably number one, number two best AC players ever in the States.
I know Watcher was the perennial heavy guy. Like he's
Watcher is more known as a sniper guy using lightweights, but in AC3 he ran a tank because in AC3 tanks and heavyweights were strong, with the exception of the stick legs. What are they called? The Huso.
Oh, the Huso, yeah.
Yeah, those were banned outright because they were just broken. You can twitch dodge everything with those. But with the exception of that, heavyweights were super strong in AC3. So Watcher got second place using a tank with an energy shield, a machine gun, and 2 cannons, a grenade launcher, and I think that's a grenade launcher. The GN220. I want to say that's the lighter one.
I guess the light one.
Yeah, that's the light one.
Yeah.
Yep.
And then he also used ECM pods, which I guess they didn't really care about in AC3. Because traditionally ECM has been banned in Armored Core just because it slows down.
Yeah, they're usually
Yes.
Bro.
Shout out to Crow. I was literally just about to mention Crow.
Yeah, Crow's on banned.
Literally
Crow
the only
was
literally the only
banned.
two hard arena opponents use Crow in AC3.
Yeah. Third place in MLC3 was Cole Bell. He used the tank with the grenade launcher and the howitzer, and a machine gun. Fourth place was Lord Murthel. He used a midweight with a sniper rifle, shield, and vertical missiles. Fifth place was Franco, which is Penguin Deuce's friend. And if you don't know Franco, he is known for using like the most busted shit whenever he can. So he used a big gouged heavyweight reverse joint with a 20-shot plasma rifle that hit like a truck in that game. Howitzers and some orbits with relation missiles. So of the 5 top placers in AC3, one was a gouged midweight, like almost a heavyweight, 2 tanks, and 1 really heavyweight biped.
Amazing when you don't ban Oppai, how much that changes the dynamic.
It does.
Sure.
No, absolutely.
It does.
Yeah. So AC3 was very much a heavyweight game.
Yeah, I
No,
know.
I would say I could argue not necessarily because it's only a heavyweight game because Oppai is not an option.
Well, yeah.
I would argue that's not necessarily the case because Oppai being a thing, we had the exact opposite on our scene because Oppai was a thing.
And as soon as it wasn't, I know we did classics events later on, like for Silent Line, because Oppai was banned for that. When it went non-op, I just saw the amount of heavyweight shoot up. I think the last 3 or 4 rounds were all tanks. Baker had a tank. Harlequin had a tank. We had another genuinely heavy biped in, and they just sort of skyrocketed. And then sure enough, they'd go into box arenas.
I know the way defense stacking in that game really affected how important tanking was.
Big time.
It was like exponential, right? So it was to the point where you were taking like single digit damage.
It multiplied like crazy. I got to comment on this real quick. I
think that's what people need to realize why they were so strong for the viewers at home.
Like I need to find that defense graph we made with Vector.
That's like I feel like there's a reason why if you ever watch someone play AC3, like even just like casually, 9 times out of 10 they're gonna be playing a heavyweight.
Roar Stones.
It's just so strong.
Yeah, Roar Stones. He came to the majority of our tournaments in the Midwest. They did all the way back to the beginning. ICMMs, but he would run. I know one year he had a heavy biped with extension shields that just laughed at solid rounds. I mean, you tried to hit him with a grenade launcher and he'd just chuckle it off like, whatever.
God, those shields.
I want to say those were banned in the California scene.
I hate those shields. They're they're one of the most broken things From Software has ever added to Armored Core.
War Stones was like the Franco of the Midwest, from what I've heard about him.
Yes, he
was. I was
going
to say that, and I didn't have to, so that makes me feel better about myself.
You want to talk about someone who loved to kind of play the heel. That was Roar Stone's hands down. It was really funny too because we could be on the forums, right, and people would be talking trash before events, or he'd rile some people up, and then you'd be there in person, and it was hilarious. He's actually a pretty chill guy, but
He's so meek in person.
It's very totally different. But you want to talk about the heel? We had two. It was Roar Stones and Harlequin. Harlequin didn't quite play as much of like the villain as Roar Stones would, but he would do similar stuff, and both of them would really have those kind of blowout designs. Man, I know the our 9-breaker finals for ACM M4, it was Roar Stones versus Harlequin, and they kept going to the barn arena, and it was a point blank damage race shootout between barn arena with like underweighted FAs. It was nuts. It was nutty. Real quick, I want to highlight something else. Ali's pulling that defensive chart. This is not just a tale of the tape. This is really a sort of oldest time story that we have here with the heavy and lightweights. One of them dates back all the way about 20 years ago. And let's go outside of the U.S. scene for a second. I don't know if you guys remember, there was a Korea versus Japan.
Yeah.
Roughly around this time-ish, about 20 years ago.
There's still a video about it, too.
There is. In fact, if I remember, Raven Republic did a really good special on this, by the way.
Okay.
There was a whole article on it, but it was really interesting looking at the setups of both teams. If I recall, the Japanese side ran very just light and just heavyweights. I mean, you had some Huso, I think on one of the builds, but it was really on the Korean team where we were seeing Cask featured. I mean, Shut was coming out and everything like that. And there was a video, I think, like the round 2 play. There was a Cask Shut tank that lost to Hoverblader, and just you could see the whole thing playing out. I think he was running chain gun on the tank. But then you could sort of see the way that the whole light versus heavy deal was playing out. So I mean, this is something that's not new to AC. You've always had this concept. It's just depending on what generation you're talking about, depending what your movement options are, and of course, what your armaments are, how you respond to missiles and different types of plays.
Yep.
Is, how the whole thing plays out.
I want to say in AC3, defense could be stacked so high that a full-size grenade launcher only takes like 250 off your AC.
Yeah.
Yes.
It's ridiculous.
It's a little.
With
it's a little
shields, with
silly.
shields, you can make it deal 0 damage. You only take 10 damage from the chip damage of the AoE.
Yeah.
And I know, like,
dumb.
I think it's because like decimal points were like rounded down, so like machine guns just did no damage to you at a certain point.
Yeah.
Which is really funny to think about. It's like ricochet damage before ricochet damage, but it's any range.
Oh,
Right.
man.
Just
Right.
You will
existing.
only take damage from the overheat.
I'm curious on the
No,
places.
actually.
You want to give us top 4 in the next few? I'm curious.
Yeah, so ironically, you guys said you were using tanks in the Silent Line, just no op-eye. So in MOC4 in California, for Silent Line, first place was Watcher, Oliver's brother. He ran a lightweight with the sniper rifle, actually 2 sniper rifles. The stealth missiles, which you guys said earlier, they are very good.
Yeah.
And some relations and some decoys. And basically his idea was to stay at like kind of mid to long range and just trip you out for the entire match and play for timeouts in most cases. But his overboost play was impeccable, so it was really hard to close the gap against him.
There it is.
Second place was Penguin Deuce. He ran a gouged midweight, which had close to 9,000 AP, I think maybe more. Gouged for shell defense. He ran those high shell defense legs. And Penguin Deuce is a Chad. He ran the Minisala in Silent Line.
Yeah,
which is kind of mid in that game. It's not like
It
Right,
is so
right.
bad
High
that
tier.
game.
Style points,
Yeah.
though.
yeah. But the fights always looked fun. Just seeing the purple
Like he was
blast.
there with a run of those. Yeah.
If whoever hasn't watched the Penguin Deuce versus Watcher fights, they're on his channel on YouTube. By all means, watch them. It's very, very crisp and slick overboost play, like counterplay nonstop, and very
Awesome.
good tracking play as well. Like his lockbox is always moving around. He looks so busy moving his lockbox. The only bad thing is it's like a 20-year-old video, so it's like in 140p. But what can you do? Anyways, he ran the gouge midweight with the Minisala sniper rifle and orbits with relations.
Nice.
Third place was the lightweight Blue Boy with machine gun, howitzer, and missiles. Fourth place was Angelo, was a midweight with machine guns and missiles. Fifth place was Franco, and again he ran his super heavy reverse joints. So defense was still strong in Silent Line, but Silent Line started kind of favoring more speed than AC3 did, at least for the California scene. So
it was still
three.
the same. It was still the same here, by the way.
Yeah. Okay. So of the top 5, 2 are lightweights, 2 are midweights, no tanks. So that's a pretty big sea change from AC3.
Yeah, and we're gonna have even more, I think, to lend to this. Oh, good, you found it. Sweet. I'm adding one thing. We're gonna have more to lend to this. I'm actually looking at it in my closet right now. I've got a treasure trove of videos ranging from ACMM 1 all the way to 4.
Nice.
And one of these days, I'm gonna get all those uploaded, and that's gonna be preserved because there's a lot to tell, and there's some things I didn't see, and some things several of us, have forgotten. But for sure,
yeah.
I definitely want to add that to the collection. And yeah, again, like TM saying, if you guys have not watched some of the really, really old school AC matches, I highly encourage you to do it. If you're kind of wondering what movement was like, what positioning was like, and then sort of creating that spatial awareness in AC and like how people would really set up a finals game. It's awesome to watch. It's killer stuff.
Yeah, there's the Watcher versus Pigman Deuce. I recommend that. There's a video on YouTube from one of the RR guys. He has a video of Emery, who was considered like the top dog in Japan at the time. He was playing Silent Line against some random guy, and his movement was super crisp as well. That's a good watch as well. And then there's a video I think Nick's uploaded a long time ago of a grand final in Japan from a Silent Line match. It was very, very heavy on the overboost play. And the way they play Silent Line is they basically kind of overboost joust at you and they chip you with rifles for like a second or two. Then they run away. So it's nonstop, like overboost, chip, run, overboost, chip, run. The Japanese are very, very passive. So they always like find ways to time each other out in Silent Line. But it's still very crisp and very fun to watch though, just because the overboost play is impeccable.
It's elegant.
Yep. I can also talk about MOC 5 as well. That's Nexus.
Right,
First place. Yeah. Okay. So first place there was Achilles. He ran an FA heavy with the grenade launcher and a sniper rifle, and
FA legs makes sense.
and an EO core. Second place was Rebel Soul. He ran
RSPK, one of my favorites.
Who, I mean, the videos. It sucks. They're not on YouTube anymore for some reason. They got taken down. They used to be on YouTube.
Oh, that sucks.
But Rebel Soul played lights out. Like his tracking was amazing. It sucks we can't watch it anymore. But he played a quad with an interesting setup. He had 2 grenade launchers. He had the heavy one and the light one. And he would run dealer's choice and drop either one based on the matchup. So during the finals, he would kind of alternate between the light geo and the heavy one to see what feels better. Third place was Archangel, who I believe is Achilles' cousin. So there's more like family dominance there. And Archangel ran a tank. Tanks were very strong in Nexus and Ninebreaker just because grenades and well, actually cannons in general were very strong because in those games, your AC's hitbox is humongous. So cannons can hit you really, really easily, even across the entire map.
Right.
Fourth place was Yaka. He ran a lightweight because that's what he always does. He doesn't care about the meta. He just always runs lightweight. Last Raven, there was no MOC, but in those games, or I'm sorry, in those tournaments, Penguin Deuce won 2 of them. One using a midweight with a grenade launcher and overboost. The other using a midweight with Sawa and handguns, which was like his kind of callback to Oliver. He wanted to like kind of harness Oliver's presence and his Sawa bot.
That's cool.
His spirit. So
that's cool.
Right.
And then Yaka took second place in the tournament where Penguin Deuce ran the Sawa bot, and Yaka had a tank. So tanks are still somewhat viable in Last Raven, but you have to run like the highest tier stuff. Like Yaka ran the RS sniper rifle, which is the best gun of the game, I think.
Yeah.
and he
That gun
ran.
was
Mhm.
insane.
It was
Yeah.
sick.
It's very much like one of the few guns that can
That
actually
and
hit you
like
from across the map.
that and like the H3 hit pistols were like insane if I remember correctly.
Those were
I-
banned in Nexus through Last Raven, at least in the California scene.
Yeah, I remember just them being outright banned.
Yeah, because it was so the heat output would just cripple you no matter what.
Exactly.
They have
Yeah.
more.
You ran.
They have more heat per shot than the flamethrowers in that game.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
No, they were
or
oppressive.
flamethrowers.
Yeah. As far as like light versus heavy and Nexus and Ninebreaker, I definitely think heavies were favored for the most part because those games tended to favor a damage racing kind of style because hitboxes were huge and weapons had good tracking.
I was curious, what
Mhm.
weapons were banned in Nexus? Just out of curiosity, or parts?
Nexus was the Worm sniper rifle because in that game that gun had 60
It was
ammo
nuts.
as opposed to like
it was
24.
crazy.
Yeah. And it was basically hit scan because of the large hitboxes and good tracking. So they banned that. They banned the E2 core. That's the lightweight
Of course.
machine gun core.
Free
Uh-huh.
damage, as we call it.
Yep. As well as the Selena, I think, was banned on hovers at least.
Interesting.
Recently, we banned the Selena core and Ninebreaker outright just because it's basically if somebody has that core on them, you can't get within 200 meters of them because you'll take damage from the Selena, and it's like basically solid bolts you're getting hit with.
Right.
So it's very oppressive. And as far as like Last Raven goes, it's really really tricky because two of the best frame parts in Last Raven are classified as midweight parts,
Yeah.
but they have like heavyweight stats. Those being the S3 legs and the lemur arms.
Lemur. Yep.
Lemur, I remember Lemur. Yeah.
Yeah.
Lemur.
Yeah, there are entire like sections of heavyweight arms and heavyweight bipeds which don't get used because you have Lemur and S3,
Yeah.
and FA as well. And then the best core in those games is the UA core, which
The
statistically it's a heavyweight. It has the most AP and defense, but it's like lighter weight than most of the heavier cores are. So
yeah, because sorry to cut you off, but also because you're not
Yeah.
running that many heavy weaponry in that game too, so you just
Yeah.
gouge your defenses, and because Underwing was so strong in that game,
Yeah.
you would still be pretty fast for being quote unquote a heavyweight. I just figured that I should specify that.
Yeah. So in those games, it's all about getting as much defense and AP as possible. Especially in Last Raven, because Last Raven's very defensive. The second you have an AP lead, you're going to be playing defensively and backing up because you can dodge way easier that way and use way less
Exactly.
energy. What was I saying? Oh yeah, so the arms and legs, the heavyweight ones, you don't use at all. And lightweights, you don't really see much in those games either because gouge midweights are very, very popular. So the name of the game is to get as much stats as possible from your frame and like kind of minimize your weight from your weapons.
I think there was only like one leg you ever really saw that was considered lightweight in Last Raven, and it was paired with like I think it was Dingo 2? No, Dingo 2 was mid-rate.
It's funny because it's classified as a midweight, but it has lightweight stats. Again,
Yeah,
lightweight, or rather, Last Raven has some
midweights
weirdness.
midweights were interesting in that game to say the
Yeah.
least.
Frame parts kind of just blend together in Last Raven.
Yeah, they do a lot
Yeah.
in Last Raven. They did. Yeah.
Yeah.
You did see Yaka use Panther, which is it's a
It was
viable
Panther.
lightweight.
That was actually the one I was thinking of. Panther.
Okay, yeah, it's the high heels
like the
one.
actual, the actual lightweight.
Yeah.
I know that was pretty good with I think overboosting. If I remember correctly, I could be completely tripping out.
It handles really well because it doesn't really jump high, so it won't
Oh.
hard land itself if you jump,
Right.
which is a very important thing because in Last Raven, once your legs go yellow, once they get damaged, you're more prone to hard landing, and in Last Raven, there's some kind of bug to where every now and then you hard land and you take like a super hard land. Your AC stalls for like an additional second. It doesn't do anything.
Yeah, I remember
Yeah.
that.
So having a leg that doesn't really jump too high is really good for handling. It allows you to keep on moving
I want
and
to
dodging.
add on
Go
that
ahead.
real quick. First of all, Lizard forever, for one thing. Second, I remember I had a conversation with Yaka. We were doing some back and forth on Kai, and he made a really interesting comment back then. It kind of brought me to something I hadn't realized. He was talking about slide jumping and your stats and why maneuverability was important and why when you went into a drift, when you went into a slide, how there were certain stats that would sort of snapshot. And I don't know how much research is done on this after the point, but I know he mentioned specifically with your moving versus stationary drain, and your stationary drain taking a forefront role, mentioning that, okay, quads look very, very draining from the outside, but if you move with them in certain ways, and if you take advantage of drifting, you actually get really crazy good energy performance
Mhm.
with having really good stability and good cooling still. So it again makes that case. It's one of the few ACs where snapshot portions of your movement could really, really play in. And if you weave that into your play style and certain moments, really taking advantage of maybe someone let their guard down, or you're really drilling an attack, it could really play in your favor. I also think the idea of escalating damage, like explosive damage, felt like it started more kind of post LR. Later on, we get assault armor with 4 answer, and then we start getting boost kick when it comes to 5, and now we're where we are currently in 6, where combinations of all those can be devastating, or just combinations of certain weapons to just keep massive stuns or setting up kill combos potentially. But
Yeah,
I just
we have one touch death combos now in AC6.
exactly,
Yes, we
exactly.
do.
And that's such a change of pace. I think even at some of the most brutal play during third era that I would see, setting up a kill that fast usually didn't happen unless you were just misstepping your dodges. You got hit by a pile bunker, or you got the big parry blade hit with something else. That was rare. I know it just kind of stunned people if you drop within the
Yeah.
first 15 seconds.
Titan missile arms, go.
Titan missile arms, yeah.
Yeah.
Something
There has to
silly.
be a big skill gap for the Titans to hit. I think there's two big reasons why, like, the old AC games have real high time to kill times, but
Right.
in the actual matches, yeah, they're going to play out for 5 minutes. And the two major reasons I say compared to AC6, one, there's no hard lock. It's very hard to be aggressive and stay aggressive and keep a lock on your opponent with no hard lock, because you're dealing with another person, and they're very slippery with their movement. You can't predict what they're going to do for 10 plus seconds at a time.
Right.
The second is just the regular boost system is so crisp, so robust. It's very easy to dodge shots in those games.
Yeah.
Unlike AC6, where you're either taking every shot up close or you're far away and they just miss you by default because they don't have high velocity.
Right.
So to me, having a much more nuanced neutral game in the old games leads to just way longer matches as opposed to AC6.
Yeah.
So Z,
That is very true.
well, we talked about who won our SL thing was the op by with the LQ15 and stuff.
Yeah.
Who won? Nexus was Mayhem.
You mean which tournament? Midwest Mayhem, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Nexus was Midwest Mayhem 3, and Ninebreaker was Midwest Mayhem 4. We had 2 Ninebreaker tournaments: Midwest Mayhem 4 and Midwest Arena 1. I hosted. But
Who won the Nexus
MM3.
one?
Nexus was that backdoor cooling build. I'm trying to remember what his name was. Goodness, we got it on tape. I got the tapes.
I know
Yeah.
Radar was a big proponent of backdoor cooling.
Yes. That was really big. I can't remember if we were banning Jiren extensions then for that day, but I know it was a backdoor build that won, and the builds trailing right behind it, there were a few others using that idea. Just to magnify that a bit, in Nexus, which was where heat really became more of a factor, and this calmed down a bit going in Ninebreaker.
It was
and Last
the
Raven.
factor in that
It
one.
was the defining factor, yeah.
Yeah.
And there was this trick where people used for cooling. So they said, okay, well, we're under these extreme circumstances, so instead of worrying about managing my heat and keeping just in the blue, we're just going to run in the red zone the whole time and just go into a burn. But the idea was to use your forced cooling as your main cooling stat instead of your cooling. So the idea was just basically keep yourself burning, but control the burn, and you wouldn't have to worry about too much oppression from whatever your opponent was throwing at you. And for the day, for that Nexus tournament, that first one coming out, we really felt that in full effect that day. It was interesting.
Yeah, it's because in that game the goal is the goal booster is so powerful, it's so efficient.
Yeah.
And then either the Linden or especially the Vigor radiator is so powerful as well.
Yeah.
It cools you so fast once you enter overheat. Funny enough, like recent days, I find myself using Goal G91 Rigora and Ninebreaker, just like a semi backdoor cooling.
Smile's my favorite. Yep.
Yeah,
nice.
I get so much energy using it. Yeah.
So that was, and on the Nexus side, that was mostly light midweights, wasn't it? If I'm correct.
Yes. There was still a blend that day. I remember
a blend that day. I couldn't go because I was going through cancer treatments at the time. So
right. We didn't. There's a funny story to this, and I know where you're linking it. Cleric had a design that I contend to this day, likely, if not the finals, probably would have won the event because people just weren't expecting it. It was Cetus arms, Selena core, RM3, the circular missile extensions with dual verts, and urchins.
That sounds very toxic.
Absolute brutality.
Now on paper,
brutal.
it looks like it's not enough energy. It has too much heat generation. You're going to be slow. Like on paper, it looked awful to people.
Yeah,
but I for the time, there was really no safe range to deal with it. If you got up close, it was urchin time and turn on Cetus and burn mode. If you backed off, it was dual vert and Selena time, and you're going to eat them alive regardless. And backdoor cooling, forget it. You can open the back door, you can open your front door, you can open the side doors in your car. You will melt, and it didn't matter. It didn't matter. That design would heat you to max, and you'd stay there. That was it.
Yeah, the Cetus had an actual a mode that was like high heat mode.
It did.
You had high heat, lower damage, and you had lower heat, higher damage, higher accuracy for the bigger ones.
And both were really, really good.
Yes,
like the high accuracy could snap you across the entire map. That's how accurate it was.
There's a quick story with Roar Stones. It was funny. We had an exhibition in the Midwest. These are kind of like the unwritten, the unsung things. Besides our tournaments, we had a lot of smaller events and exhibitions or sort of smaller scale tournaments. We had one called the ROP Ravens of Peoria. It was the first one I hosted. It was a silent line event, way smaller than anything like an MOC and stuff. But we did a exhibition and just a practice round or two before ACMM3, and Cleric knew he wasn't going to be able to come. So he brought his Cetus Heavy, and Tierson, no one was paying attention to Cetus arms then. And I remember Roar Stones and Cleric did a series of 1v1s, and after that, that completely changed Roar's mind about it. He went to Tierson. When he got to ACM3, I remember the night before he set him down, and he said, "These need to be banned. Let me show you why." and he put that frame together, and so
I've heard that story many times from him on ACU. He loves talking about it.
Yeah. funniest thing. So no, but that was definitely a case for heavy. I just think that the day probably would have folded out a little different, but that Nexus tournament came fairly early in the Nexus life cycle. I think then in the Midwest, a lot of people were still experimenting. I didn't even have a staple yet. I was running a lightweight sniper quad mostly, and I had the GLL light grenade launcher. I think I had like the vert missile extensions and the RS sniper rifle. What was I using? Rockin' Core with A92XS arms and lizard legs.
Mm.
Yep. So here's my question. I guess I have. We talked 3rd gen now, 4th gen, 5th gen. We're gonna pull this back into 6th here a little bit.
Sure.
So what? So those of you, I know TM, you're part of it. I know Kelt, you are too. A lot of people might be also. How much has the quote unquote meta changed in the PvP scenes for the older, like 3rd, 4th, 5th, whatever? Not so much, maybe not as much as 5th, but 3rd and 4th especially. How much has that changed versus when the games were in their heyday, so to speak, when the games came out, they didn't get supplanted by the next release, versus what it is now? Now, I know you mentioned like, tanks are like the thing now in 4, and may not have been back at that time. Is there anything that's kind of like that with 3rd gen too, or anything else different I don't know about?
So for 3rd gen, the only games played now are Ninebreaker and Last Raven, just because they're easy to emulate and they're the few games that actually have like built-in Cat 5, Cat 6 functionality. And as far as like the meta change, no, it's been figured out since like 2005. It hasn't changed. It's the same. Yeah, I can't really think of any difference, to be honest.
That's interesting then. So that shows me that it really is a difference between scenes. Like, because in my scenes, like it was light and midweight dominant to no end. Like heavies were not much of a thing here. They really weren't. They just weren't. And on your side, they were much more prevalent, which is funny. Although it looks like you got much more mixed bag as things went on, which makes sense. We got more mixed bag here too in Last Raven stuff, but like I said, I barely, like you said, consider that as heavy because it was like underweighted FA and stuff like that was mostly what people ran.
Yeah, no, Last Raven's so figured out. In fact, I kind of like wrote the books on like the Last Raven hand weapon tier chart and a big frame guide for Last Raven. Last Raven has so many resources you can use to like figure out the meta really quickly.
You know what's funny? That I'm pretty sure that very frame guide and whatnot is what I followed when learning Last Raven for the first time playing it.
Nice.
Which is crazy to think about. Yeah, shout out. So it's very good.
Cool. Love it.
So yeah, obviously lightweight heavyweight has never been. I never thought it was that one sided in the first place. I've always was more dominated as the heavy as most places. Now I also know I've always been even when I was in high school, I was the responsible child. I had jobs, had the girlfriend. I didn't put as many hours in the games as many of the people I played against in most cases. Except for Z here, who was just a freak of nature on that quad. But it makes me wonder if we look at AC6 as a comparison, right?
Mm-hmm.
I keep hearing, and I know one of your honest opinions as far as how it's going to make a correction. I've seen so many people say that you need to add turn speed back into AC6 and that'll fix so much stuff. And I'm like, and I'm looking at it.
I don't really think so.
Yeah, I don't see how that's going to do it. I don't really
think it's the issue.
I think there's too many things that are fundamentally
that's like
changed for that to work on its own.
The way I see it, it's just one part of the puzzle. There's more things to consider. One of them was Verzel, which fortunately got nerfed, so heavyweights can't just dash at you at 400 plus miles per hour for no good reason.
Yeah, but the thing is, you don't need 400 plus. You can do 400 flat and still catch people with medium heavy. It's still quite good, and
it's still a good booster, but before the nerfs it was a little comical, I'll say that much.
It's very hard to escape in this game with anything other than the 400 speed quad at the height cap.
Yeah,
I think the things that a lot of the issues with the current meta are brought about by changes they did to the formula fundamentally, to the rule set of the game, basically.
Mm-hmm.
For example,
we talked about scoring. Yeah,
the scoring system is completely different.
Yeah,
I don't think draws are even a thing anymore.
People just leave.
The only time,
the only time you see draws is when they leave. Good point.
Yeah, the only times you see draws is when they don't do anything or when they leave.
Yeah.
So the other thing is that AP lead from the beginning is not a thing anymore. AP lead is now decided by a percentage of the health remaining.
Yeah.
Then you also have the 2-round system, which I feel like I really dislike the 2-round system because I feel like it's like a really bad band-aid solution for the TTK of the game.
I do agree with that too. I do agree with that.
So we'll get into more nuance here, but let me go back to your original question. Like, do you want to see turn speed implemented in AC6?
No.
Yes, but not on its own.
I think it's hard to say. I don't think
only
it
in
should
conjunction with other things.
I would see it in a new AC game, just not AC6.
That's, I think, the way I would put it. If they were ever at turn speed, it would be the next game, and
unless they revert all of the changes they did to the scoring system and like the fundamentals, I think it wouldn't work in this game.
It just wouldn't matter.
Yeah, there's way more to be changed than just turning speed.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Right.
I think heavyweights versus lightweights in AC6 mostly comes down to two things. One is the percent difference between a lightweight and heavyweight in AC6 is like 100% more for the heavyweight. Like a lightweight has what, 9,000 AP maybe, and a big tank has 18,000. That's literally twice the AP. They can have 40% more defense, and this is a game where defense is completely linear. So a tank having 1,400 means they take 40% less damage than a lightweight having 1,000 defense.
Mm-hmm.
And then the biggest one is stability, which is it's far and away the greatest like stat, like the most. It's a stat that determines the most in AC6 is stability.
Easily.
Yeah. And then the other thing is hard lock. In every AC game prior to 6, not having hard lock means the lightweight has options to dance around the slower heavyweight in close to avoid their lock. In AC6, like besides the one VBO build, which is basically it's a one-trick pony, it just wants to stagger you and punish you with the blade. Like there aren't many options for a lightweight to play a heavyweight up close because they'll get staggered easily, one touch deaths, or they'll get hit by laser cannons that they don't even hit on their screen because the game's laggy. So basically, all they can do is lightweights is run away and play for time.
Yes.
Okay, so let's do this. So I want to play a bunch of devil advocate scenarios here for heavy versus lightweight, making adjustments to the gameplay mechanics. Okay, so let's say, what if we reduce this disparity in AP? So let's say lightweights can get down in the 7,000s, and the heaviest heavyweights can get up to 12,000. That's the highest it can go. So that's the big heavy tank. That's the highest disparity you can have. And let's reduce the damage of all weapons, all of them, let's say to a third of what they are. So you take,
that's fine.
Take a 30%. So your lowest lightweight is in the 7,000s. Your highest heavyweight's in the 12,000s. The damage is reduced to a third of what it is currently, and it goes back to being AP lead versus percentage lead. Does that change everything at that point? Don't remove hard lock. Don't remove ricochet. Right. Don't remove the speed differences. Don't remove don't add back in turn speed. If those three things happened, do you have a much better experience at that point?
I think not. For the stability, still gonna be the deciding factor. Even more now that if tanks get AP lead from the beginning, you have to come to them now. So you're gonna be running into bazookas, you're gonna be running into lasers, you're gonna be running into so many things. And like if you still get a staggering 2 bazooka shots or 1 bazooka shot as a lightweight, you just die instantly. Like
that's
it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Even if you just missile them from a distance.
The thing is that with AP lead, you can just sit behind cover.
The thing is,
and the tank can bring their own missiles too.
Like people are just gonna play at a distance regardless with that. Like they're just gonna sit back and shoot missiles since there's not really any repercussions to playing that way. Especially in the current map pool where there's very little cover, or like we mentioned previously, there's no anti-missiles really in the game. So there's really no repercussions with that. Just doing
the stagger system just enables for too much of a disadvantage.
Yeah.
For the lightweights to be like better under that circumstance.
Okay.
Now, if you change the stagger, then
keep the game exactly how it is. Just remove stagger. Then what?
If you remove stagger, I think the game will be.
I think lightweights kind of
slightly
get away
better,
with a lot.
Yeah.
We'll see.
So.
Is this right now? Oh, go ahead.
Oh, you can go. You can go.
Is this right now? Lightweights are either one of two things. They're ratting you to play for timeout, or it's the VBO that plays purely to stagger you and blade you for like 8k AP. Mm-hmm. So you remove stagger, all you got left is just rats. And that's one of the big issues with AC6.
And I think rats right now are actually like the strongest they may have ever been currently in AC6 because they got rid of the one way to chase them down pretty much with Berzel nerfs. So they just, instead of being heavier rats like they used to be, they're now just like full lightweight rats, like with lamber legs, for example, or they're just permaflight in some way, and they just rain missiles from above.
Speaking of the Berzel nerf, it's something else that's just interesting here. I just kind of smile at this, and I think it's in no way like an instant counter to rats, but I think the 42B tank legs are the fastest assault boost legs right now.
Yes.
They're the only thing with over 10k power.
Yes.
And that's just funny to me. It's funny to me. I was like,
no,
wait.
it's very funny.
But they're still super slow.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah, that's like the one thing they're really good at.
So,
and I'm using Coral Gen.
So Bowles, the guy who like won some of the early tournaments, made a video today where he talked about how he S-ranked both singles and teams. He used a float tank, the one with the really powerful assault boost, with Coral Shield and laser rifles and the LCB, which is a different story. But I guess the LCB is ridiculous. But it sounded like to him that with the float tank, he had a bit of a chance to catch rats. I'm not too sure though.
Uses missiles, so it's like, yeah, okay, no problem.
I can't say too much about how it worked in ones. I don't know. Was that what he ran in ones as well? Out of curiosity.
In ones, it was a lot of like Larbster, but in climbing and ranked, I think he had a missile boat.
Okay. Because I know, Dirk and I can both confirm that in 3s he ran a missile bolt for sure.
Okay.
And to be perfectly honest, it wasn't that terrible to deal with compared to other crap in the meta.
I'd rather the missile launcher I can catch eventually.
Yeah, exactly.
Because there's no other way to fight because there's no mid-range weapons.
Exactly, and I was fine fighting them because I can just shoot them with missiles and whatnot. So I think, I think that was fine, generally speaking. Missile boat. It was obviously overtuned on release, so with the coral nerfs and everything, I think it's fine.
So here's something that I feel like it's also, I wouldn't say it's a bad change because we didn't really have this before. But it's one of the issues I feel like the game has with its FCS system. Which, first of all, I think the FCS system is by far the worst we've ever had.
Yeah,
it's complete
I agree. I actually
unsalvageable system. But there is something that I feel like not many people know, and granted, I uninstalled the game after release, like after the tournaments were done and all that. So I didn't play in between patches, so I don't know if they removed this or not. I came back to the game on this patch. I don't think they changed it because I didn't see anything in the patch notes. The way the FCS system works is that whenever you quick boost the lock circle will disengage from your AC.
Yep, that's still in the game. So it works so you know, like a blue lock in older games where it's like not fully on them, your weapons will just miss a lot more. That's in this game, and it happens anytime you quick boost any amount. So gill abuse, by the way.
Yeah.
Here's the thing with that system, which I think it's horrendous. It's actually a stupid decision. If they did this on purpose, I am baffled. The amount of time that it takes for your FCS to regain lock to the AC, to the enemy AC, is equal across every single booster in the game, regardless of your FCS speed, and regardless of the QV power of the booster. Which means that the highest power booster in the game and the lowest power booster in the game have an equal amount of time where they are not on target when from the enemy. So for some reason, they made it so that the biggest, the booster that creates the most distance doesn't really give you a benefit. Because the FCS will regain lock instantly no matter what. Well, not instantly, but at the same time no matter what. So I feel like they really need to change that. Because what's happening now is that in close range, the only way the lightweights have to not get hit, they're gonna get hit eventually anyway if you're using weapons with a huge AoE. But if you're using direct fire weapons like lasers, the only way they have to deal with them is by spamming quick boosts.
Yes.
But eventually, the moment they run out of energy, like you're just gonna regain log and shoot them. So I feel like if they change it so that if you have a really high power booster and you quick boost, the actual separation between the log and your AC like adds to the time it takes for them to regain log. I feel like lightweights will be a little bit more competitive because they will get more mileage out of each quick boost, and so instead of spamming quick boost, you will get a benefit from using the coral booster. You will get a benefit from using a Lula over gills, for example, where now you can
that's one of the
separate
reasons
yourself
why.
quicker. You can separate yourself more from the enemy lock, which gives you
100%.
more breathing room.
And that
That's
would
actually-
remove one of the most frustrating things in the game. And that is that if you like make someone flick 180, right? You go right over their head. It's going to lock right onto you faster than if you were 180 meters away and they're using a Celis, because you're outside of their effective range. But if you're inside of their effective range, they can 180 you faster than they could adjust 2 degrees in front of them.
Yeah, and this going back to like, the whole FCS and how the adjustment, that is also one of the several reasons why rapid fire kinetic weapons are just not good. No matter how many times they buffed it, it is still not good because
that too.
You actually, the accuracy of them, even with good recoil control and firearm stabilization, it just isn't good. It's still just not good enough. You will still miss even on a tank.
Yep.
Not only that, but
your shots.
This is the I hate this. When I saw, I was dooming when I saw the gameplay trailers and I saw this happening in footage. You cannot shoot mid quick boost.
Yeah.
So any weapon that requires uptime to deal damage, like Gatling guns, because like the moment you stop shooting someone with a Gatling gun, all your DPS is gone. Like you're gonna lose the DPS rate no matter what. You're already losing the DPS rate even if you're hitting.
This is especially important when keeping up stagger too, because kinetic weapons, aside from shotguns and vientos, they don't have that much stagger accumulatively. Like it can drop off pretty easily. So any amount of time where you're not shooting at them means a lot.
Yeah, so you end up having to choose between evade to not die or not evade and keep your uptime, which you're still not gonna win because like a bazooka is just gonna do more than your GAT will do with its entire magazine in a single shot. So it's really bad for any gun that requires uptime. For like the fact that dodging prevents you from attacking. That was never the case before in any of the other games. You could always shoot no matter what you were doing, unless you were like a staggered. But the stagger worked differently in the other games. It doesn't matter. So I feel like they need to remove that. Like they need to unlock the ability for you to fire mid quick boost, because that is creating a huge amount of problems that maybe they didn't realize would happen. Also, this is a pet peeve of mine. Make handguns automatic, please.
Yeah,
a lot of things, like even rifles, man. The way I have my controller set up, my left hand gets tired after like an hour of playing AC6. I'm an old guy now.
Handguns don't have any sharp shot. Why can I not just hold down the trigger?
Yeah. I kind of agree with that. That is it is pretty annoying.
And
if
for
they
some
fix,
reason,
go ahead.
For some reason, this is like one of the first AC games where handguns are outranged by a shotgun.
Yeah,
that's never been the case.
Rifles are.
Usually handguns like prior were kind of just like baby assault rifles with sometimes machine gun levels of speed and portability. And now they're just like, okay, if I'm literally in the range where I could kiss you, maybe I'll stagger you. If not, then ricochet.
And they expanded the range of every ballistic weapon except for handguns for some reason. They haven't touched them at all. No patches have touched them. There are two guns that have not been touched. No, there's 3 weapons that need touching and haven't been touched. The Revula needs to get nerfed to oblivion. I fucking hate it. The vertical missiles have not been touched and they're still trash. They're borderline. They're actually unusable. The handguns are just forgotten. I don't know why they're forgetting the handguns. They're just not getting buffed at all, and they need it.
Now
they added more ammo.
They did. They did that to Sour guys too. Yeah, clearly it's good.
So, I feel like I want to see 3 things change from like 6 and see what like go from there. I'd like to see everyone like get like triple the health. I'd like to see the quick boost shooting restriction removed. I feel like that will fix a lot of the issues with the guns that require uptime. I feel like handguns will be instantly better. Machine guns will be instantly better. Rifles will be instantly better. They will be able to like space out enemies way better without losing like uptime.
Yeah.
And I think they need to fix the fact that every booster gets caught out by the FCS at the same time. They need to make it so that a big quick boost launch actually separates you from the enemy reticle for longer than a smaller one. And I like to see what the game becomes then, because I feel like that will open up a lot of possibilities for builds that are like neglected because they're just bad, they're not real.
I agree.
To actually have like a place in the meta, because it will give them better uptime, actual evasive and survivability, and it will also make it so that I forgot what the first one was, so I'm just gonna shut up.
More health.
More health. Yeah. And then you wouldn't get killed in a single stagger.
Essentially,
right now,
essentially
ACs have 2
increasing the
lives.
TTK. You're basically talking about increasing the TTK, essentially.
Yeah.
As a threes player, I would be very happy with that, and I play one of the builds that kill things the fastest. Dirk can confirm.
And it will also make it so that you don't automatically lose if you use your core expansion first, because usually the person to use their core expansion first just loses.
That is true as well.
One thing I wish they would get rid of are their core expansions. Like if they have like 3 times
they
the health,
remove them.
No core expansions. I think they're all annoying in their own way.
They all, I don't like them at all. I really don't like them. Just remove them.
This is actually true, because in the current state of the game, I know that this is something that's been talked about in threes. Terminal armor, which is basically the be all end all on that, even though it's so strong, it's also like a necessary evil at the same time, just because we are so squishy in this game, where one stagger ear shots, for example, but just anything in general, the LCBs as well do insane damage, and you can constantly like re-stagger people the second they get out of it.
And the new pulse missiles stagger you from across the map with like
exactly. So like having more defense would desensitize the need to like have basically a lifeline that is terminal armor, and we would actually maybe survive, or maybe take a bit more time if we get a gang up on one person and kill them, and not just like kill them in 2 seconds.
Yeah, I made a quick drawing earlier, like a meme describing my experience with AC6's ranked 3s. I'll put it in the chat right now. So I'm one of the guys on the ground, by the
way. I'll be sure to add
that is a good illustration. I like that.
I know. Dirk can most definitely relate to this.
Yeah, I play aggro, so I am the missile target. Oftentimes my terminal get pops, and I look around, and no one is within a country mile of me, man. Like no one's in my postal code.
Yeah.
I'll add it for everyone's enjoyment on the video.
It's so hard to get people to move in threes unless you like do it, like you be the first to aggress and get them to move yourself. Otherwise, they just all kind of stay back and not want to get damaged.
I will say this much: this wasn't nearly as bad before we had the ranking system, because we had different maps. For example, we ran Jorgon, which was very small, and you could actually kind of chase rats more realistically, or corner them so that your teammates can cover them. We also, since we played like in lobbies and whatnot, we had coordination. We could cut off rats, we could team up on them, so it wasn't as bad. But when it's ranked and you have no communication, no way of pinging where people are, no maps, none of that, and every single map is open, which only benefits the rats, you get like the drawing that you're sending here, TM, and that's basically how it's played. Because like all of the things that I love about threes is not there anymore. And I am a missile player. I play missiles.
Yeah, but like the thing that happens is like, what's the safest thing you can pick, right? If you're gonna queue threes, is it a heavyweight biped with like some lasers to brawl it out? No, dude, it's a lightweight with missiles, because you can run from anything in the game and you can shoot people from any range. And if your whole team is doing it, who cares? It's fine.
You need damage, earshots.
But if you go with a heavy tank, or if you go with a quadruped or something, and both of your teammates are, there are so many ways you can suffer.
Yeah.
No, actually,
I've been running a heavyweight biped with 2 LRBs and 2 PRs and swapping them back and forth. So I do mad damage regardless, but it's just so annoying to like have to be constantly, 2v1 or 3v1. It's just not a fun experience.
It's why full tank. Sorry, one more thing is it's just why full tanks are really not very good right now in threes, with the exception of lower elos where people aren't quite as coordinated with comboing things. They just get comboed to death, and there's no way they can really do anything about it.
Yeah.
So obviously, there's a wide variety of opinions what you should or should not change in order to make things more balanced for different leg types or archetypes, what have you. Mm-hmm. This is interesting to me because if you look at Armored Core's past versus now, you look at a lot of the Armored Core 6 fundamentally is a very different game. PvP wise especially. Now granted, we all know and from said it a million times, and people want to talk about it's not an excuse. It's not an excuse. From Software is giving you their reasoning. Like, this was designed to be a PvE game. I know people don't like taking that as an answer, and I understand why. And I understand PvP's always been part of the games, even though it was more PvE focused per se. But this was like, man, you should have. If you Z was there with me at the press conference, at the pre thing in July. We went to California. We went to California and we had like the intro to it. I can't express to you enough. In that 30-minute intro, they gave us like the game design philosophy of what they were looking for in the game. They must have said 8 different times in that 30-minute period how they were really emphasizing the single player element in this game.
Yeah.
And the PvP was just something they added on. And when we interviewed them later, me and Cheng did, we interviewed them later. Probably every answer we asked about future content or future this or rank this and things like it's like we're really focused on having people have a successful and entertaining and engaging single player experience. So I know people don't like that answer, but at the same time, like they legitimately made essentially a single player Armored Core where the PvP really was just an afterthought. It was.
I mean, I think it's pretty obvious that it's an afterthought, considering that there was literally no way to leave lobbies for the release of the game when the game is going on. Like, you just could not leave the replays.
Correct.
You actually had to just quit out, like, Alt F4. Otherwise, you'd have to sit down and watch them play. Which was a bit of a massive oopsie from Software to not even include an option to leave a spectator.
Now, that being said,
it really wasn't the focus, and it makes sense. It seems like a limited budget, a safe step back into a 20-year-old, 30-year-old.
I think, they didn't know how well this game was gonna do, for one, and they had to appeal it to an audience that's obviously not into mecha.
This is what I was going to get to too. It's like if you want to look at the design philosophy, like 6 has its flaws. I still enjoy the game immensely. I think it's fun regardless of its flaws. Which it has many.
Me too.
I think with this game, I was in a long conversation in my Discord server, and I was asking some questions, some frustrations. I was venting a little bit with some people, some talking about stuff. I said, it's like, how do I handle or deal, or when I'm talking to people and express these things? And they don't just talk about them; they talk them in a very unconstructive, unhelpful way as far as what the issues are with the game. And we were talking, about some other things and things that come up, some content that have been created recently. And they said, look, you're thinking too hard about this, Cleric. I'm like, why? It's like, you realize journalists docked the score of this game because they couldn't beat the helicopter. And I'm like, okay, and? From had to design a game for people like that. And I'm like, oh. So what you're saying is the PvP experience is indicative of the fact that From was worried about making the game too difficult to play. And essentially everyone's like, yes, that's literally what it is. And I'm like, I didn't give it much credence, but I went back and thought about it later. And I'm like, if you look at the design choices of the PvP, one, not just being more of an afterthought, but if you look at how the game itself plays, it is uber simplistic.
That's actually
It's uber
like the
simplistic.
perfect way to put it. It's like dumbed down Armored Core, and I don't mean that like even like incredibly offensively.
Sure.
That's what it is. It's kind of the
very
reality.
simplistic. So with it being this simplistic, that's because they were designing it that direction. So it's like, yeah, I that never even crossed my mind as far as that level of things go. So I'm like, do you think that's where the detriments come from, or is it something else?
I'd say a tiny bit, yeah. I think AC6 is the game that has to stand up and walk before the next AC game runs and flies.
I think that's a great way to put it. I think this is going to be a great footwork for now that people are used to what Armored Core feels like and what Armored Core plays like and everything, and people are used to like the whole customization aspect of it. Armored Core 7, or if there's an expansion to 6, will definitely touch on like expanding more on the lot of silly mechanics that this game has that can really reduce skill variety and skill expression.
Yeah, and I think you guys are batting at several of these points, but I mean, if you look at this sort of uphill that From has encountered, reintroducing a series like this to the public at large that it's been dormant for so long, really trying to drive home the customization aspects and everything. But Mecha is something that so many companies don't want to touch. It's a Waterloo. They get mired down and I mean, the closest thing that I played, I think, before 6 came out was like DXM Deus Ex Machina. What can I say? We were talking about this earlier. Shoji Kawamori's designs got me again because he worked on some of those, and of course I went and took a look at it. But it's such an interesting scenario to me. The most PvP focused Armored Core, or the 5 series, where there was actually implemented specific online systems for that, and yet some of the more robust, especially back during the LAN era and LAN events and everything, those tournaments were always brought to life by the community more so. It's just interesting. And the longevity of AC, it's never been designed as a PvP center. It's always felt like the PvP's there, the Versus is there. I mean, Link Versus was the most bare bones thing. It's there. Plug up 2 PS2s or plug up 2 PlayStations together and just go. All these things that the community breathed life into, gauntlets and team tournaments and non-op-I and op-I tournaments and everything. None of that was an invention by the game by itself. But absolutely, if these are growing pains for the next sequential AC, or I don't even know if an expansion would do it. I think it would be AC7 by that point, because then that's when you start getting new mechanics introduced and everything.
And this game did well. And this game did well enough where an AC7, like, few years down the line, is not out of the question.
Definitely.
Armored Core 6 After the Fires.
Ooh, that would be raw.
Yeah, but like it's not a pun.
True.
They mean it.
Alright, we can rename it Fries of Rubicorn, like that one video.
Alrighty. So we're hitting at we're past the 2-hour 40 mark as of 30 seconds ago. I'm not sure how much longer. I know some East Coast here, Z's here. I know some are West, some are Central, like I am. Any other particular notes that people want to bring up as far as heavy versus lightweight? Anything specific?
I don't think so. I covered what I was going to regarding 3v3s and how that is basically just lightweights now. So I think I'm good when it comes to that.
I think they just need to solve the latency in the netcode. They need to give a more robust infrastructure to their matchmaking in PvP, like actual dedicated data servers to handle, weapon trajectories, and what you see on screen is what you're actually getting. Like, that's one of the main reasons why I mostly prefer old school AC PvP, is because what you see on screen is what you get.
Yeah.
The downside there is you got to be like in the same country as the person and play them. Otherwise, it's a massive slowdown. But in AC6 especially, you can like visually dodge, say, an LCB, and it'll still hit you regardless.
I will say, at least regarding bazookas, they helped a little bit with that.
Yeah.
Generally speaking, bazookas, when I get hit by one, unless the internet connection is terrible, it feels like I deserve to get hit by it, or it was like just barely off of where I was on screen.
So the
But
bazookas,
it's still not good enough. It's still not good enough.
Yeah, the bazookas. I know they reduced the proximity detonation a little bit.
That too.
Did they also change the defender versus attacker side detection?
I believe it did as well. It helped. It alleviated just a little bit. So it's both the proximity explosion and that helped it actually make it a little bit more fair.
Yeah,
they said they changed the sync formula or whatever it was.
Whatever that means, yeah. And it's not as simple as saying like make everything defender side, because then you get to like for answer issues where there's so many ghost hits.
If you make to an extent, if you make things defender side in this game, you're never gonna hit anything.
Yeah, and it's actually we already see that a little bit with missiles. Like it's very common for missiles to just ghost hit because it's defender sided.
So to be like a serious PvP game, FromSoft needs just to put more into the infrastructure for it.
I've got two things I think they really need. One, divorce from easy anti-cheat. It's so easy to hack. It's useless, and it has
we've already seen hackers.
Measurable.
Yeah, we are. We're already seeing hackers.
Measurable detriment on performance on the netcode. Like if you watch gameplay from people who are playing on PlayStation without easy anti-cheat, or people who can play on Linux, it is so much better. Divorce from easy anti-cheat. You're a big boy company now. Grow up. Get yourself a real solution that doesn't tank your game's performance. And the second thing, I just want freeform lobbies. Let us do whatever we want with our custom lobbies, please.
I agree.
Because longevity is going to come from people who want to play this game like for kicks. And like, what if we want to have 3 1v1s at once?
I also think that like having this is more of an outreach, but different objectives, like even like a capture the flag mode or something like that, would actually solve some issues with this game. Because currently, with the timer and everything and all the mechanics in place, you are so encouraged to just play for timer with like rats and whatnot, and that would be a good band-aid, at least like band-aid solution to encourage more aggressive play, at the very least.
Yeah, I'd be down for more different gameplay styles.
Also, just be fun.
Yeah, why not? Yeah, like to me, teams already feels like team deathmatch and like a shooter game. So why not add more?
Exactly.
Game styles.
And I'll go ahead and raise my my petition banner here. And rally and pull all day and lobby for a Assault STAI battleship style co-op mission. I would love that. That was my favorite mission back from AC2. That would be so sick to see with the stuff we see today for AC. Man.
I think if they ever do DLC, that's like the top of my list. Have co-op in some way.
Yeah.
Assault STI battleship.
I want invasions from the other Souls games on Armored Core, so I can invade other people's missions and mess them up. For
it's funny. I just talked about that. I just talked about that on my Twitter.
Enemy AC detected.
Literally.
Oh boy!
And it's like a freaking like the biggest abomination you've ever seen of a build. It's like, what is that creature?
Like, how would you? I mean, we're all AC nerds here. Like, how would you love to be the AC that you've heard the cutscene in 1,000,000 times in different Armored Cores? Like, where you hear the sudden, like, enemy AC detected. It's like, and it flies in, and it gets to be you. Like, that's like an Armored Core fan's dream.
Let me put it this way: don't you want to be Mind Ball?
Exactly. There you go.
Have the piano start playing the second you show up.
Oh my god, that'd be crazy.
All right, anything else to add before we wrap this thing up?
All right, I'd like to give some closing thoughts.
Sure.
I already gave my solutions for AC6. I'm gonna take the doomer stance. I'm gonna take the complete opposite, the non-optimistic approach. I think for the type of player like me that values the fundamental mechanics of the game a lot and like the PvP and all that over the PvE, because I've always felt like the PvE is too limited to truly bring out what the games are even capable of.
I know what you mean, yeah.
I don't remember what I said. I think I said it on Twitter because I was ranting. I can't help but be bitter that they massacred one of the most unique and in-depth and interesting like PvP games ever made for a campaign that wasn't even that good. Because in my opinion, that campaign was like barely above the standard for like the other games.
Fair enough.
Wow.
I did not like that campaign at
You
all.
know, I actually see why someone would dislike the campaign, even though, and I'm saying this as someone who absolutely loved it, and it was probably my favorite first playthrough of an Armored Core game.
I know a lot of people loved it, but that campaign did nothing for me. I was I was optimistic. You can go. I live streamed the entirety of it. You can go see my impressions.
Very dramatic is a good way to put it.
Deteriorate as every playthrough. It just my opinion of the game just gets worse.
It is very dramatic. I'll say that much about it.
That campaign was not great. So for them to have sacrificed and like mutilated such a great like game formula just to accommodate that campaign, I cannot help but not like it.
I would conjecture. I'll let you finish. I would conjecture it wasn't completely sacrificing PvP for PvE. I think it was them reintroducing an old series in a new way to a newer audience. That I think they were literally concerned about gatekeeping with the previous nuances of the previous games.
Mm-hmm.
Now, was that the right approach to take? Probably not. But I think they were. I don't want to call it dumbed down. That's why I use the word simple. I think they simplified it for a greater audience, is what they did.
Like, I'll be honest, I knew they were going to simplify it before release. There's no reason why they wouldn't, considering that they're such a big company now, and like it would be financial suicide to reintroduce Armored Core.
So I get where you're coming from, Celtic. I do. I completely get where you're coming from on that one.
And I think when it comes to this, is like, if anything, this was more Armored Core than I thought they would go. I thought it was going to be way, way more different, and to at least get some semblance of that classic style that I love and grew up with was more than enough to make me happy.
Yeah, but I remember that was one of the main questions on Reddit. Remember, they were asking, "Is it an Armored Core? Do you guys feel it's an Armored Core game?" We said resoundingly yes.
Yeah, like it feels like an Armored Core game, but it also doesn't at the same time. Like it's a thing.
So yeah, I wanted to touch on that you mentioned.
I appreciate hearing your perspective.
They needed to reintroduce the series to a new audience, but I've always felt, granted, I've been through the game. I've been through the franchise. Like I know, like basically all there is to know about almost every game. So like I already went through the learning process. I already learned how to learn an AC game. So I'm biased, obviously. I'm incredibly biased.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that their fundamental problem with Armored Core was never that the games are too complex. I think the games are extremely simple, actually. There are layers upon layers of optimization there is to master, but the core basics of the fundamentals you need to learn are not that hard. However, I think the games do a horrible job at teaching you how to play them.
Yeah, they never mentioned bunny hopping in early gen. They never mentioned second staging in fourth gen. They never, like, so many things.
Was second staging intentional?
Yes, it's 100% intentional. There's no way it's a mistake. It is 100% intentional. There is like a whole lot of mechanics behind it. In fifth gen, it's also in fifth gen too. Like if it was an accident, they wouldn't have brought it back. And not only it's in fifth gen, you have stats. You have visible stats that modify how your second stage behaves.
Right.
That you can read on the boosters. Like if you boot up AC1 without the manual, you're not gonna have any idea how to play it.
I mean, the fact that I didn't even know it was intentional is evident enough that they did a bad job of teaching you the game.
They don't. Unfortunately, they don't even teach you how to quick turn. If you don't know how to quick turn, you don't know how to play the game.
I'll be honest, that's just a FromSoft issue, period.
And I know multiple people who have beaten the entirety of 4th Gen without knowing how to quick turn, which is the absolute base mechanic you should know.
When I played it as a kid, I didn't know how to quick turn.
I did it.
Quick turning is to 4th Gen what bunny hopping is to like the old games.
No, actually,
if you don't know how to do it, you just don't know how to play the game.
Going back into it, I don't know how I beat some of the like hard mode missions without quick turning.
And like I feel like they went the complete absolute worst case scenario. in terms of how to like reintroduce the series because they just dumbed it down or they made it simpler. When I feel like the only thing they needed to do was not to dumb the game down or remove things from the game. It was just to explain them better. But that was never going to happen. Like I'm not going to expect From Software to do that because they do a horrible job at doing that all the time.
I will say they did.
They don't know how to make a tutorial, and
I'll say the tutorial. Sorry to interrupt you. I will say the tutorial for 6 is actually pretty good overall, but there aren't that many mechanics in that game compared to the other Armored Core games. So there's only so much you need to know, anyways. It's like get the guy staggered, quick boost around.
Helicopter done.
No, literally, yeah. Like so, I will say I'll give them credit for that much. They at least did a good job teaching you the game in 6.
From Software has a really bad transparency problem with their games.
I mean, look at Elden Ring.
Yeah, they just don't like. I don't want them to tell you everything, but at least I want them to mention like the base mechanics of the game, and like they've done a horrible job at it.
Yeah,
look at this way too.
Like, go ahead.
No, you said like the tutorial level in 6. The only thing I wish it would have covered in the tutorial was Ricochet. I feel like that was a missed opportunity because I think that was part of the reason people had a hard time with the helicopter. But again, to go back to my original conversation I had on my Discord, like despite how simplistic they made the game compared to previous ones, and having a full tutorial level, that granted it did end with a boss, but the boss, once you're used to it, is a piece of cake by comparison. But it's people still couldn't get past it. I mean, there's. Let me see if I'll let you finish your thought, Celtic, but I'll look up the stats real quick on the achievement on that. Because I think there's still a huge player base on Steam alone that still hasn't done it.
Oh.
So here's the thing. I feel like they underestimated their player base. Like that's how I feel about it. Like they made the game. Of course, I'm really biased because I already know how to play the games. So my default is not the default of everyone. So I feel like they took the wrong approach, and they underestimated how good,
especially the average sold player is.
Yeah, they underestimated how good the player is because, like, at the beginning, I don't know if you noticed that your AC is missing a weapon.
Yeah.
Right.
And I still think that weapon should have been a shield, but for some reason they didn't give it to you. That's not that's not them forgetting about it. They intentionally left that slot open because they thought it would be too complex for you to be able to use 4 weapons at once from the get-go.
Yeah.
And like that just told me everything I needed to know. That just told me how From Software thought of like the players and how they made the game based on that approach. But yeah,
well,
in my opinion,
go ahead.
From a PvP player's perspective, Armored Core 6 doing well is the worst thing that could have happened because I think they're just gonna keep making AC6. But this is just me like absolutely like going for the worst case scenario possible. Yeah. Like I am purposely going like the complete opposite direction that everyone else is.
I wonder how much of the old stuff they want to bring back and how because they have actually talked about internal discussions where they had some of these older mechanics and older difficult things. They were like, we wanted to do it, but we decided not to this time. We might revisit it.
Yeah.
I hope some of that is more of the classic stuff. But I understand, like, these games have always changed, and they've really never backpedaled too much, did they? Like, Verdict Day didn't even backpedal much. It was slower, sure, but it still had a lot of differences from the older stuff. And 6 is even further still.
I do not trust modern From Software to not do AC6 again.
Yeah,
my coach.
Well, it makes the most sense to basically make a direct sequel to this like this.
They're a company. They're a company, and they need
do like a 6.5, then 7.
They have to make profits. This did really well. It's the best-selling game in the franchise by a lot.
One of their best-selling games. Period. One of their fastest-selling games, I should say.
That's true. So I feel like I do not trust modern From Software to not just remake this game. So everyone who didn't like it, like me, we are out of luck. Unfortunately, see you all in 2045 for AC8, where they decide to.
When someone eventually makes like a successor to Classic AC in some way.
But at the very least, they caught like a lot of new players, so it is.
Yeah,
I think that's
unfortunately.
Yeah,
I think that was the point.
Unfortunately, my demographic is not profitable.
Exactly. I think that's where you're hitting the nail on the head there. I don't think it was meant for even people like me or any of us who were old AC heads. It wasn't meant for us. It wasn't.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't meant for us. It was meant for the new place. You can tell the design entry was designed for a new player base entirely. That's what that was the play.
Yeah.
So here's what I'm gonna show you. So of all the players who have put time into on the Steam end of Armored Core 6, 6% still have not completed the intro mission. 10% has still not assembled a different AC. 14% still have not changed the color of their AC. 20% have still not climbed the wall. 33%, still have not upgraded their any of their OS parts yet. Only 25% have not collected 10 data logs. Not all of them, just 10. And still about 30% have not even cleared Attack the Watch Point yet.
Wow.
And only 70% have completed all the training modes.
Even with all of the nerfs to Balteus and stuff, it's still 30%.
Correct.
I hate that they nerf Balteus. I
agree.
Same.
I agree with you.
I think
same.
As someone who's beaten them without heals and starter AC, I thought the fight was incredibly fun until the nerfs.
So
now it's just lame.
My only hope is that they intentionally, because they clearly intentionally dumbed down the game to introduce it to new people. Yeah. My only hope is that what they're gonna do is that they'd be like, okay, we caught everyone. Let's make a real AC game now.
I think
hopefully that's gonna happen. I doubt it. I don't trust Modern From Software to take risks. But maybe that's my hope. That's my little.
I think if we get more patches, there'll be a telltale sign. Because I think the patches right now were like patches that should have been in the game, period, like ranked and whatnot. But when if we do get more patches that are like actual extras to the game rather than like stuff that just should have been in the game, period, then we'll see how it feels. I think
like these parts are very clearly stuff that was missing from release. Like
exactly.
You can actually just look at them. Like were missing. You were missing 100%. The light quad legs. They were not in the game for some reason. Every other leg class has a lightweight, midweight, heavyweight variant.
No Gatling gun. No Gatling gun either.
No Gatling gun for the back.
It's the first Armored Core game that never had one.
We never had we didn't have an energy weapon, an energy missile for the hands. We had it for the back, but not for the hands.
Yeah.
And we didn't have a lightweight version of the high firing, not firing stability, I forgot what it's called, recoil control. We didn't have a lightweight version of the recoil control arms. Now we do.
Yeah.
So like they were clearly putting things back that should have been there on release.
Yeah, so I think that it really just depends on how well they do future patches, if there even is future patches in the distant future, or in the near future, I should say. If they're all good and they're all like actually adding interesting stuff and whatnot, then I'll have pretty high hopes. But if not, then this is probably just gonna remain like dumbed down Armored Core, where it's fun to play, and I'm still gonna play the heck out of it because it's Armored Core and I love Armored Core. But it also like at the same time is not an Armored Core game at the same time, or at least a good Armored Core game.
I will tell you, thanks.
And I love this game.
Thanks to Chang, mostly thanks to Chang. Getting in contact with Bandai, we are submitting feedback and stuff to them regularly as far as like player consensus and player vibes or any player issues, things of that nature. So the biggest problem is we don't know how much of it actually is get listened to. I think some of the feedback we gave early on actually was kind of listened to. I think the feedback was pretty similar to Japan's though as well, which probably helped as far as why they made a lot of the adjustments they made back in like patch 1.03.2 was a huge shift in a lot of things. Mm-hmm. So my hopes is with player feedback, they are very much looking for input and ideas. So I would not be surprised if there is a larger overall outcry for more complexity and more nuance in the game. I would not be surprised if it's something they actually do end up adding, because they are definitely looking at feedback.
Next time we have like a talk like this, we should all just make like a long wish list of things talking about major.
I don't have 10 hours, guys. I can't do that.
Well, that's what I mean. Future talk. When we have a whole day to kill. You know what I'm saying?
Let's go get coffee somewhere and we can do it then. That's what
there we go. Have a coffee break. No, I'm done.
Oh man, All right. So, thank you, Celtic. Thank you, Dirk. Thank you, Sabbath. Thank you, TM. Thank you, Z, as always.
Pleasure.
Thank you, everybody. I appreciate your
Thank
time.
you for having us. Thank you so much for having us. It was a pleasure to talk. I loved talking to y'all.
I'll definitely do this again. I'll figure out time to have another conversation. We can discuss in maybe another couple weeks or a month or so. If anything else changes again, then maybe we can have a further discussion on some, or maybe sooner if you want to. It's up to you guys. So, anyways, thank you all for joining me. Thank you all who stuck around for 3 hours.
Next time we talk, we play 3v3s after.
Oh gosh!
Oh snap! Let's go.
That'd be fun.
I don't have that much time.
Yeah,
I'll go
do it during while we're talking. See, I'm trying not to die, and then like we have random screaming in the middle of a serious conversation.
Armored Core 6 wish list, but we're playing 3v3s while doing it.
Anyways, thanks y'all. I appreciate your guys' time. I really do.
Have a good one.
Bye.
Take it easy.